What's up, guys, and welcome back to another episode of I'll Call You Right Back podcast with me, your host. My name is Chad Medved. Welcome to the show. A little bit of a break the last 2 weeks. You know, your boy was having a little bit of a mental breakdown, but, I'm building myself back up. I'm feeling good. Just picked up my car today. Quick 25.50 off the top. No big deal. Shout out to Subaru. They actually did hook me up. So just an idea, you know, if you have a car that is a Subaru that has any sort of problem at all, reach out to their customer service because they do some good stuff over there. I reached out to customer service. I have a 2010 Subaru Forester. It had 85,000 miles on it. I reached out to Subaru customer service and I was like, yo, I just got beat over the head with a $3,400 bill. Is there anything that you guys could do? Because one of the people that listen to the podcast, they reached out and they told me this. They put me on some game. So I hit up Subaru's customer service and I was like, yo, is there anything you could do? They were like, all right, let me look. And then he was like, I'll call you back. So I thought I wasn't going to get nothing back. I called them, $750 coupon right off the top. So that $3,300 bill, went down a lot lower, and I'm thankful for that. So I just figured I had to give Subaru a little shout out. And I know a lot of people drive Subarus. So I mean, if you ever got something wrong with your car, I'm putting you on some game. Doesn't hurt to ask. $750 discount. No big deal. But anyway, we got some business to take care of. This week, I had a hell of a week, as everyone might know, but I did deliver all the Best Friends merchandise. That is the Turners and I'll Call You Right Back collaboration merchandise that I just got in. Very, very excited about it. Shout out to Revival Print Co. Out here doing God's work in the middle of this chaos because there's shortages on manufacturers, there's shortages on staff, and Dan down there at Revival Print Co. is really, just always on top of it. Cannot say enough good things about Revival. Been working with them for over a decade now, I think, and I can't recommend them enough. Best print shop in the city. But had this merchandise, Turner's I'll Call You Right Back merchandise. I know it was highly anticipated, but I got it out to you as quick as possible. If you're listening to this podcast right now, you either have it or you will be getting it today or tomorrow. If you're out in California, like a couple people ordered, that's Friday, I believe. Altoona, Friday. Those are some of the delivery dates that I've seen. But if you're in the Pittsburgh area, you probably got it today. You probably got it yesterday. But, I even hand delivered some of these things. Shout out to Franny D's. Franny D's is a home baker. I'm going to get her on an episode here soon. Big fan of the podcast. She bought a crew neck and I hand delivered it to her. And she hooked me up with an old school Southwestern PA cookie tray, and it was fire. Had pumpkin gobs on there, had Reese's Pieces cookies, had some other weird bars that I've never seen that were delicious. But I'm just appreciative. I'm appreciative for people wanting to buy my merchandise with Turners. I'm appreciative of people voting the podcast second best in the city. I'm out here grinding. I know I had a couple weeks where I was in my feelings, like a Drake song, but I'm out here killing it now. I'm out here. I have a better mental mindset, and we're out here doing good stuff. I came back after this hiatus with a fucking banger of an episode. But before you get to the episode, right now, Turner Dairy Farms, they got some pumpkin spice eggnog that's out in the local bodegas that carry Turner products, and it's fire. I can't tell you enough. My place got it on deck. I've had it a few times now. If you haven't yet, I'm sad for you. But get to the bodega before it's gone. But the reason that everyone is here this week so people ask me about this podcast. They say, what's your favorite episode? Who should I listen to? I mean, out of 182 episodes, I keep coming back to Kevin Drobish. Kevin Drobish is he works at the Pittsburgh Institute of Mortuary Science. He does... he taught reconstructive classes, which is basically how to rebuild a face of crazy trauma. He was a forensics investigator. He worked under Cyril Wecht. He's done over 1,000 autopsies. So Kevin Drobish is, I always go back to tell people that's my favorite episode that I've ever done. It's just fascinating. It's fun. It's kind of light for being focused around death, but you learn a lot, and it's just everything I want in a podcast. That's episode 90. If you want to get Kevin's backstory. But highly anticipated, 2 years later, almost to the date, me and Kevin sit down again for I think this might be one of the longest podcasts that I've done. I thought about breaking it up into 2 pieces, but fuck it, I'm sorry for swearing also as well. I know there's some people from Pittsburgh Institute of Mortuary Science listening to this, but I'm amped up. I'm excited. I had a wonderful time with Kevin. I fashioned up some delicious breakfast sandwiches, and me and him tried my hot sauce because Kevin is actually, I think he's the first guy that put me on to growing his own peppers and making his own hot sauce. I believe we talked about it on the first episode, but since then, I have also started to grow my own peppers, and I have also started to make my own hot sauce. So we tried the hot sauce that I created, Death Breath hot sauce, in the beginning of the episode. We have a little bit of mouth action, a little bit of the chewing, you hear it. Hey, deal with it. I'm sorry. It doesn't last long. But Kevin brought me just a cornucopia. Look at that word. Cornucopia, seasonal and a 10-cent word. A cornucopia of gifts. And, he brought me a Miles Davis kind of blue vinyl. He brought me a bottle of his hot sauce. He brought me a whole Tupperware container full of smoked peppers. He bought me some super hot peppers. And then he brought me, he just brought me all kinds of shit, and I'm just... It was one of my favorite episodes. We talk about death. We talk about what PIMS was doing during the pandemic. We talk about the new innovations that they got going on down there. We talk about how this is the first time in many, many years that PIMS has a waiting period to get into the campus. And it's pretty crazy to hear about that. We get into death. We get into some wild ass shit. And Kevin is just for a guy that's surrounded by death for, the last 2 decades, he's a great guy. Very, very fun, lighthearted. I can't thank him enough for coming on and talking to me. I could have spoke to him for 3 more hours, but I'll quit talking your ears off. I'm sorry about it. Proof is in the pudding. So without further ado, Episode 182 of I'll Call You Right Back podcast with Kevin Drobish of Pittsburgh Institute of Mortuary Science and Ralph's Chronic.
I gotta use the telephone.
Hello?
Telephone.
I'll call you right back.
Telephone.
I'll Call You Right Back podcast.
Yeah, it's gonna. In fact, today is the end of the grow season. I think. You would.
I gotta pick all my fucking peppers.
You would not believe what I harvested yesterday. I don't think I took a picture of it, but it's like a big bucket. Because it's just it's gonna start going down to 46.
Yeah.
And 64 will be the high. So I'm everything's gonna be done.
All right. So my plan for this is we can enjoy this sandwich on here.
Nice.
And talk about it. Pull the mic up towards you, get comfortable. This time you actually have headphones to hear. So, last time I didn't have headphones. I was in the trenches last time. But we leveled up over here. I'm pumped about it. I've been looking forward to this. Is your volume good on your headphones?
I think so. I can hear it.
Okay. All right. I feel like this is going to be one for the books. First thing is first. So we just mentioned it before, but 2 years ago was within this week of the anniversary of you coming on here.
Yeah.
Greg from One Up was the reason that this happened. Okay, I have to give him all the credit because as I do in October, I look for creepy people to come and talk to me about weird stuff for October. And Greg was like, you got to hit him up, old skate rat that's pretty into it. And I was like, sounds a little bit too into it almost. And here we are. But it was one of my favorite episodes. I give everyone your episode along with Sarah's episode, along with Pittsburgh Wildlife Management. Those are some of my favorite episodes out of I think you're going to be 183. And wow. You're right there.
Nice.
You're right up there.
Loving it.
But I got you a couple birthday gifts. So you just celebrated a 50th birthday.
Yes, I did yesterday.
Congratulations. You definitely don't look 50 at all.
I feel it.
Well, I mean, you look like a skeleton right now with that shirt.
Anatomically correct.
So here's a bottle. This is a bottle of my hot sauce that I made. Okay. I think that you might have been the first person who has told me about, that was like a hobbyist hot sauce person. I think that I remember you being like the first one that told me about it. I got a knife if that, you got that? Okay.
There we go.
But I prepared a little bit of a vehicle to try this hot sauce, and I'm excited about it because I'm hungry anyway. But that hot sauce, made it, grow my own peppers, and it's not super crazy hot, at all, but it's everything sauce. I enjoy it on pretty much everything, but I need honest feedback.
Oh yeah,
not bad, right?
Now see, that's when I go for my hot sauces or salsa. You want heat, but you want flavor.
Yeah.
And that's it. The flavor is intense, but the heat is perfect.
Just enough to like get you a little sweat going. Nothing too crazy.
And it sits like in the back of your mouth.
Oh yeah.
So it doesn't burn your tongue.
Yeah. So I mean,
I like it.
It was my first run at it. Actually, technically my second run. My first run was, I don't think it was as stable because if you look at it,
this settled a little.
Yeah. You know what? It's settled.
The thing is, you have to learn your mash ratio, and it's a chemistry thing.
Absolutely, this is a big science project, but I'm taking a bite of this too.
Damn, dude, it's good. And it's also, you were saying like an all-day thing. That's what you want, is something that's usable, not just that's going to melt your face or anything like that.
Yeah, I don't want it to be something crazy where it's like, you can only eat one bite of it and you're like, fucked for 3 hours where you're just like, I can't do it. But this is enough where it's like, if you put enough of it on there, you're getting a little burn.
Oh yeah.
But it's like, it's also, like I put this on some wings the other day, and like it's spicy, but it's not like you're not getting crushed.
And I think that's the thing, is the thickness of it would sit on wings well. That's why it's the all day sauce. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's like and that's what the goal was. Something that you could just put on, because I'm a sauce guy. Like I enjoy my sauces with all different foods, like au jus, all that. And I mean, I'm very late to hot sauce. Like I was never a spicy person.
I didn't get into it until I moved to Colorado. Like being in the Southwest, there's hot sauce or peppers on everything. Like breakfast. Like you get green or red chilies offered with everything you order for breakfast. And everyone thinks that red is hot. Green chilies are much hotter usually. And they would always have pork in it.
Yeah.
So I had to be careful because I was a vegetarian then. So when you order green chilies, you had to ask, is there pork? But I got used to eating peppers and that kind of stuff. There was hot sauce on every table and every restaurant. So it was usually that Yolanda's or something like that. And it was so funny. I got so used to it that when I came back to the East, my tolerance was really high and I couldn't get real Mexican food or, things that were hot enough when I first moved back. But then all of a sudden, everybody got into hot sauce.
Well, it's weird because it's like here, we have ketchup bottles on our tables. Whenever we went to Colorado, me and my wife, there was hot sauce bottles.
Yep.
And even in California, there was more like Tapatio on there and like all those Valentina hot sauces. Those were like, the staples of what was on a table at a diner. And you had to ask for ketchup at some places.
Oh, yeah. And it's usually not Heinz.
And it's like, come on now. You can't go that crazy. But so the hot sauce, I mean, I'm happy with it. I'm gonna take a couple more runs at it. But like you've been making your own hot sauce for how long?
About almost 5 years now.
5 years.
And it's funny because I think I'm starting to get it down to a science, even though my problem is I don't write recipes down. I'm terrible about it. I make each one up as I go. And I have a basic skeleton, I guess I use. But then I expand on it each time and kind of use different peppers. But I'm going to actually start trying to start a small side business selling hot sauce. And I met a guy that's going to kind of be my mentor through it. His name's Tom Mata. And I met him at a local watering hole down in Bellevue called Lincoln Avenue Brewing, which I'd like to plug here a little.
Yeah.
It's my third space. It's one of the places I go to. And I meet really interesting people there. And they serve a hot sauce there at the restaurant. And it's from Allegheny City Farms. and it's a locally grown small little operation. And they have an all-day sauce. They have one of theirs is called an all-day. And it's funny you mentioned that. Then it's good with everything. So, and they have a couple of his products there. And I never met him before. And one day we were sitting there talking, and I was talking to somebody on my left-hand side about growing peppers, making hot sauce, my garden. And I talked about the different types of fermentation you can do. So you can do hot or cold, where I do it the lazy way. Cold fermentation, you just put it in the refrigerator and let it sit for a year.
Yeah.
Bring it out, you're good. You can do the hot version where you have to scrape bacteria and
Wait,
things
you
like
wait
that.
a year?
Oh, yeah. Everything I make, I age for a year in the fridge. Yeah.
Really?
Because it'll get hotter and more flavorful the longer you let it sit. And that was something I learned after a year or two, because I wasn't very disciplined. When I would make it, I'm like, I want it now.
Yeah, like I had no idea about that. Even in my little bit of research, it's like I feel like no one's really mentioned to me, like, wait on it a little bit. But it makes sense. It's like you want it to, whiskey and everything like that.
And
all the best
strain
shit.
it. Leave the seeds. Leave the mash.
I don't strain any of it.
There you go. And
I want a little bit of that pulp. I'm a pulp guy whenever
Okay.
I have orange juice. So I want that little bit of that.
I strain mine, and then I keep the mash and use it for cooking and things like that. I used to throw it away. I used to never think about, this is something I could use. And my friends were like, what do you do with all your, seeds and pulp? I'm like, I usually toss it. And they're like, give it to me. I'll use it. I'll throw it like in a stew.
Oh, yeah.
And the thing is, it lasts forever because it's so vinegar and salt saturated that it's not going to break down. Like you can just throw it in your fridge and it'll last forever. So,
wow.
But yeah, I started fermenting, and the longer it sat, the better it got. So I do that now. I have a refrigerator. I have 3 refrigerators now. One of them is just for hot sauce. That's all it is in and out with a rotation of, so I'm literally bringing out batches right now that were done from a year ago.
How big is a batch?
It usually depends, because like when it's in its raw form with the mash and everything in it, I'll usually make about a quart. Usually, or about 1.5 quarts per batch. But now I'm starting to get a little bigger. Because I've grown so many peppers this year. Like this year has been a banner season for my garden, and I almost couldn't keep up with what I was growing to a certain extent. And luckily, I like to share with other people. And but it was tough to keep up this season with my production and making the sauce. That's what I'm doing as soon as I get home, is making a giant double batch of sauce, because
how do you use the peppers?
Well, it's October 16th, and I'm still harvesting. And I know we were just talking a few minutes ago, the weather's going to change drastically tomorrow.
Yeah.
I think the end of the grow season. But I have never grown as much as I did in October as we did this year. It was just wild. It was so warm. It was 80 degrees yesterday still.
Yeah, really wild.
And my tomato plants, of all things, have brand new flowers on it, which clearly aren't going to grow into anything.
Yeah.
But it was amazing to see how much we are harvesting this late in the season. So
when did you implement a garden? Like whenever you were like diligent about a garden? Because this is my first run at it. I have that small box out there. I planted 2 jalapeno plants, 2 habanero plants, a ghost pepper plant, and 2 banana pepper plants. And I'm new to this completely. So I'm just like researching some shit online. I'm an absolute idiot, because the first thing I read was, stress out your peppers. Don't give them a lot of water because it'll make them way hotter. So all my shit was dying. And I asked my buddy who makes hot sauce, and he was like, nah, that ain't right. And I started drowning them, and they're just like perking back up. Like these ghost peppers that were literally dead they're I think there's like 12 of them out there right now. So I'm going to have to get it. Intro, though, another birthday present that I have for you. These are pepper seeds from a pepper grower called Mycotech. He is from, I want to say he is from the left side of the nation. But those are good ones.
Apocalypse Scorpion. I've never heard of that one. And it's funny because I brought you Armageddon peppers.
Oh my goodness.
Which are the hottest ones I think I've ever grown. So we'll see how those compete.
Yeah, I wish that I did a little research and put the Scoville units on there.
We'll find out.
I know, I'm sure, but So
habanero, wow.
Yeah, so last year whenever I got these, I was heavy into it, and I become obsessed, and I buy the best shit, and I just so this dude had a pepper drop, and I was like, man, pepper drop. So I went nuts. I bought like I think I spent like $120 worth on seeds, and I bought some super hots. I bought some regular ones, but last year I wasn't prepared. So I didn't want to like, fuck them up and try to like, bite off more than I could chew, because you have to like, they're coming from a seed. So like it takes way longer, and like I didn't have anything prepared. So this year I'm excited to like, kind of ramp up my production. But I'm sorry for cutting you off before.
Oh, no.
Growing though.
No, it's wild. I think about it. We started so small when we lived in an apartment still. It was when I was in mortuary school, right after mortuary school. So we're going back like 10 years. We had a balcony.
Are you still a vegetarian?
Oh, no.
Oh, my God.
Oh, good. No. that was long gone.
I was going to say, I put some wings that I smoked on the grill last night. I minced them up in here.
Oh, no.
And,
totally.
oh, my God, I was like sick about it.
Oh, no. I'm eating meat like crazy.
Go ahead. I'm sorry for interrupting you.
But so literally we started growing herbs. My wife's like, I want like fresh oregano for pasta. So I was like, all right. Well, we just got one of those little rail kind of planter things, stuck it on just started growing things. Then we branched out into tomatoes, peppers, and we started getting just small containers, and we maxed out what we could grow on the patio within 3 years.
Yeah.
And then we moved into a duplex that had a little bit of usable space in our backyard, but we built a planter box in the front yard, which is one of the easiest ways to garden. You know
Absolutely.
Because
raised up a little bit?
Raised beds are easy because animals aren't usually going to get into them unless they really want to.
Yeah.
And they're easy to maintain. You just change your soil out every season or two, amend it a little. But, watering is kind of easy because it'll kind of keep in there. But, yeah, it's easy to maintain. You have to worry about tilling and all that. So we started growing things there. And one of the things we started growing early on was catnip, actually.
Catnip?
Yeah.
My goodness.
It's funny because we have cats. And the neighborhood we lived in, there was probably 15 neighborhood cats that kind of were outside, like just roaming around, hanging out. And I started growing catnip, and all of a sudden I started realizing the neighbor cats were coming and kind of pilfering my garden a little. And it was really funny because one of the cats that did that is actually now one of our cats. He was like a neighborhood stray. And we ended up naming our catnip after him. So it's Ralph's Chronic is the name of his catnip. Okay, because it's really good. It's been cultivated for 6 seasons. And it gets stronger kind of the more you grow it.
Yeah.
And we harvest only flowers. Okay, so it's the difference like between like what you would get in a grocery store is usually going to be like stems and seeds and leaves, literally.
Of catnip?
Yeah. It's cheaper because the flowers are harder to harvest, and it's like the patience thing.
Yeah.
You got to let it grow, let it flower. And it's funny, so the ones we started growing, we realized if you just use the flowers, it's 10 times more potent. And it's really strong. So people say, oh, my cat, doesn't like catnip. I said, give him some of ours, let him try it. And it's the flowers that make the huge difference.
Is there any other use for catnip besides catnip?
Well, it's wild. So catnip is a botanical cousin to marijuana and hops, of all things. Okay, they're all in the same kind of family.
Because it kind of looks like weed.
It does.
Yeah.
And it's funny, hops, even when you look at them, when the cones, you know what I mean? They kind of have those similar appearances.
Like a bud.
And they're basically just, an herb, a flowering herb. And
yeah.
They all have their own, interactions with people and animals. So, for example, like, some cats will eat catnip. Some will just rub up against it. Some won't touch it at all. So it's if they have receptors for it, just like humans have THC receptors or, opioid receptors. So some cats will get sleepy. Some will run around like insane.
Yeah.
It's different reactions, just like people have different reactions to different strains of marijuana, things like that. Some, people say, oh, it puts you on the couch. Some people say it makes me feel all energetic. So it has a different interaction with every cat. It's really wild. But we've been growing it so long that we give it away. And just, for friends, family, things like that, my students that have cats will take it. And now we've grown it so much that we're going to start selling it this year.
That's awesome.
And we've had people ask for so
Ralph's
long.
Chronic. That's what it's going to be called, Ralph's Chronic?
Yeah, and it's going to have we got to come up, we're going to do a little LLC. That's all we have to do to actually sell catnip because it's not food and it doesn't have a medicinal purpose. So you have to have an LLC for it. So it's actually kind of easy to get it up and going. You just got to market it. But we have enough people that we know
Hell yeah.
that'll buy it or promote it.
Word of mouth for sure.
farmers markets. That's actually what we're going to do. Is we're going to go around to local farmers markets, and because there's usually places that sell herbs and things like that. So we'll just say, hey,
I just love that environment more than anything. Like the exchange of sale. It's like I grew up in flea markets with my dad.
There you go.
You know, I remember going to like a half day kindergarten, getting off the bus, going down to a flea market. My dad would slip me a 20, and then whatever I could buy. You know, that's how I learned how to wheel and deal.
That's like a gold mine. That's
my
so
God.
fun. I think about like, Trader Jack's or whatever right down the road.
And I don't utilize it enough. I haven't been there.
Okay.
But, and I've also never been to the place that's in Ohio. They only have it on like Fridays or something.
Gotcha. Yeah.
I think it's called Ralph's maybe.
It's one of those ones that's, it's
But it's like
once
everyone's
in a
like, you
while.
need to go if you're into it. And I'm just like, I might be overwhelmed. I'm trying to like, are you someone who collects things? Are you a collector?
Yeah, it's terrible. And it changes as I age and I've come and gone through things. Like I used to be the Star Wars guy. Like I was a Star Wars kid.
Oh, yeah.
And it's funny. It was something that I realized that after my father died a couple years ago, it was a bond I had with him going back to the original movie. Like when I went with him when I was like 6 or 7.
Yeah.
Yeah, when that came out. And it was kind of funny because like, it was weird. Like, and then I guess it got Disneyfied. And so I was like,
I haven't watched any of the new ones.
Neither have I. And we watched the end of the, whatever the series was, but I haven't gotten into the Mandalorian. I tried watching that a little bit.
I think the last one I watched was Rogue One.
Okay. And it's funny, like they're good. It's just it's kind of funny. I guess I wanted to watch the end of it, but I wasn't into it. It just wasn't for me anymore. But it was kind of funny because I got into it. I had the toys, and I rebought toys that I had when I was a kid.
Yeah, that's the best part about being an adult is being able to buy the shit that you couldn't get whenever you were younger,
or that you had and you got rid of, which is ridiculous.
I mean, do you remember the skate shoe, the Osiris D3?
Oh, that's one of the most like collectible skate shoe or worn skate shoe like in history.
So my mother, she was always cool, always like was able to like, she always hooked me up with a pair of shoes, but like the D3 was like above $100 retail. So that was our cutoff point. She was like, you're 12 years old, you're not getting nice shoes like that. So as soon as I got got a good job and everything, Osiris re-released the D3. I bought a pair of those, and I've never even worn them because they're just so they're comfortable, but the weight of them is ridiculous. I cannot imagine like all the people that used to skate in those. Like
and that's what I think about when you talk about hitting a price range of how much you want to spend on something that you're going to utterly destroy.
Yeah, completely shred.
Like literally, I think about that and of course, when I started skateboarding in like '87, I never ever imagined there would be a collectability level for the things that were common for me. Like my first 2 skateboards.
Oh my God.
Are worth so much money.
Can you imagine if you had all the decks that you had?
If I would have bought a second and left it new, it's unbelievable to think about that because of just something that I demolished for fun.
Yeah.
And you never thought about being a pro skateboarder in a real sense because there was no money in it back then. So I think about that, certain shoes, certain boards, certain stickers.
Absolutely,
like
yeah.
The collectability of certain
it's wild.
stickers.
It's wild, like because like I kind of delve a little bit into like just knowing what's going on as far as like sneakers now. Like I'm not a big sneakerhead, but I buy a couple here and there. And like seeing the vintage stuff. Like I have some friends that like run vintage shops, and like I see like the one dude posted a picture of like a genie, like the genie from Aladdin. Right. It was just like a big print all over on a front of a black shirt, and it went for like $6,000. And you're just like, and I remember thinking like my mother bought me everything Disney because I was into it. And if it's like I had any of that, I remember I had all the Space Jam toys and all this, and this shit is going for crazy money now.
Oh yeah, well I watch Pawn Stars. It's one of the shows in American Pickers. And
is that still? Do they still have new episodes?
I think they're relatively new. It's kind of hard to tell. Actually, I think they do because that's one of their ad campaigns they keep blitzing is new episodes on Saturday. So
wow.
But it's funny. I think about that. My wife never really she always liked Pawn Stars and she never liked American Pickers, but now she'll watch it with me.
Yeah.
But that's the funny thing. I think about that. Like I used to do kind of like low level picking, not like on a grand scale, and I didn't really resell it. But, But when I lived in Colorado, worked at a drum shop for years, and I learned how to do repairs on drums, and I started collecting vintage drums and equipment. And then I learned how to repair those and restore them a little.
Oh, wow.
So that was something that where I was like, wow, I can actually collect this stuff, repair it, and resell it if I wanted to. I still have some of it. I still have some of the drums I collected when I was there that I haven't used for 20 years. They're sitting on my shelf, which is part of the ridiculous.
Sentimental.
Well, it's part of the ridiculousness of collecting sometimes. You know, you start collecting and you're like, it's just sitting there. Like, what am I doing with that? You know what I mean? It becomes almost a museum piece, and you're like,
100% full circle. That's where I was going with the whole like fleet. We were talking about farmers markets and everything, but like I love that environment it's dangerous for me because if I go somewhere, I feel like I need to find something to buy. You know, I went to an art show the other day, and he had this, it was at Thought Robbers Gallery, and I bought this piece, and I was just like, I just feel like I got money that's burning a hole in my pocket. And even if it's a small purchase, it's like, I feel like I want to come home with something. My wife has been good at like trying to like nip that in the bud a little bit though.
Well, and that's dangerous now that you have a house. You know, when I think about that, the bigger space you have, the more you'll fill it with things. And we made a conscious effort when we moved from our duplex that we rented into the duplex we were owning to downsize, to get rid of things that were kind of unnecessary, I guess, if you want to call it that. And it's funny, we actually have done pretty well, although right now we literally are restructuring our house because we finally are buying new furniture.
Oh, good luck.
And well, it's been interesting because the plague has caused a lot of shortages.
I bought my couch December 24th of last year. Just got it August 30th.
Ooh, okay, I'm close to you on that because we went and bought 2 couches and a recliner in April, and we just got the second couch on last.
You got it?
Yeah, we got the couch. And the recliner, and we got the other one about a month and a half ago. But like we were wondering, like, are we really going to get this? And now we're apprehensive about buying the rest.
Oh my God!
Of things. We got,
same thing with us.
We did a refrigerator and a stove. Refrigerator came relatively quickly.
Those both came quick for us. Like laundry too. There was no problem with that for us.
Our stove was defective, and they don't know until they bring it off the truck. So we're like, oh crap, because our oven's been broken for months.
Yeah,
and we're like, you can use the stove, but they brought it off. They're like, it's defective. We're like, okay, when can we get another one? And it ended up being another 5 weeks. And they brought it yesterday, and I'm like, what a great birthday present.
Yeah.
They forgot the install kit and didn't know they were hauling away the old one because somebody in the office screwed it up.
Yeah.
So it's just been this like
constant battle of it.
It's unbelievable. And the shortages.
And you can't do nothing about it.
No. And the shortages in the service industry are mind-boggling. I can't understand where everybody is because,
and it's like, where can you and you have so much like pent up, like at least me, I was aggravated. I had so much pent up like frustration, and it's like I can't take it out on the person at Levin because it's not Levin. It's not my boy from Levin. And like I remember I called the one guy for an update, and this was after like the 3rd delay, and I was like, hey man, when is this supposed to come in? He was like, oh, it should be here in a week and a half, it's saying. And I was like, really? I was like, so it's just going to be here? And I was like, so that's all I could do? And he was like, just got to have faith. And I died laughing because I was just like, I can't do nothing about it.
Well, and I think about that. Like we're kind of getting a little frustrated with the delivery guys.
Yeah.
I'm just like, man, that's certainly not their problem.
I know. Exactly. And it's like,
And I think about that. We were talking to them, and we started chatting with them a little, and they were on their 12th delivery of 15.
Oh, yeah.
And this was at 5 o'clock, and they were supposed to be done at 5.
Oh, I know.
And we're like, oh, Lord, that's...
I felt terrible for the people that were doing ours, too, because they were younger kids, just working. I was out of high school. They're probably just working for a little bit of side money in the summer, and they were miserable.
Oh, yeah.
Because the same deal, they brought us a new couch, or they brought us the couch that they brought us, and then whenever they brought it to us, it was sopping wet. Okay, and we paid for the white glove service.
Same with us.
And they brought it in and set it upside down laid it on there, forgot the legs of the couch, and it was soaking wet. I opened it up with plastic. You know, my wife texted me. She was like, the couch is finally here. I was like, fuck yeah, let's go. So I was like, I'm going to go home tonight, watch a movie right now. I come home and Antoinette was like, it's soaking wet. And I opened it up and it literally, the half of the couch, it looked like it was sitting in a baby pool. Oh, and I called them and I was like, listen, I don't want to lose my mind at you, but this is unacceptable. So they were like, all right, you could have that one right now and we'll send you a brand new one in 2 weeks. But it all came through. I love my couch now, but it's like, you know, it's been crazy for everyone for sure.
Well, the weird thing about ours was I didn't even remember what our couch looked like. I'm serious. Like, cause I was just out of sight, out of mind. And I only saw it that one day and I didn't remember what it looked like until they brought it. And then also my recliner they brought, I didn't even remember that you actually have to plug it in, like to recline. It's all electric and push button. I didn't even remember that.
Yeah.
Like, it was so bizarre. I'm like, because, we hadn't even thought about it. We're like, oh, they'll deliver it, it'll come. And I didn't look it up online or anything like that.
Furniture, man.
It's wild. And I think about that. It makes me apprehensive to buy anything else right now. because it's like, what else is going to run out?
Absolutely. And how long am I going to have to wait? And is it even going to be worth it? How much area do you have for your garden right now at the current place you are?
Oh, wow. Okay. So we live in a duplex with I have a flat backyard, which is really rare in my neighborhood. And
Where do you live again?
It's Ross Township, like right outside the city.
Oh, okay. Literally. Yeah.
Like if you rode off 279, you'd end up in my backyard. Like my neighbor is PennDOT. So I'll never have anybody live behind me, which is awesome.
Yeah, that's great.
So, and it's a half mile outside of the city. So I'm like, boom, I'm in and out. It's a great place to live. And it was my grandparents' house. It was built in 1965. They were the original owners. And I have to thank my grandfather for actually leveling out the entire backyard because he actually had a small garden.
Oh, wow.
In the back corner that I found out is exactly where I started mine. The next door neighbor was one of the original tenants there, knew my grandparents, and he said, that's exactly where your grandfather started his garden. So I thought that was kind of funny. But we started really small. I mean, it was literally like 6 by 12. And within the year, we doubled it. Second year, we quadrupled it. And then now it's literally pretty much as wide as we can get without going into like the roots of a tree that we have. So that's the main garden is the back. We built a side garden that's for herbs, things like that. And then we have a raised bed in the front that's for flowers and herbs. And then we have a greenhouse now.
My goodness.
So it's about almost 800 square feet of grow space.
Jesus. So you're like, you're doing it.
It's hardcore. And the problem is when we started doing
it's hardcore.
Well, when we started it was great because I was still teaching part-time, working part-time administration, full-time administration at the school and doing a little bit of like outside work in the field. So like my hours were very open still where I could kind of float a little.
Yeah.
As soon as I stopped working actively in the field and went full-time as administration and teaching, it became a little difficult because certain times of the year we get busy.
Yeah.
And I teach lab classes that are always on weekends usually.
What are those, like 4 hour, long class?
8 hours a day.
Jesus.
Yeah, like we literally, our one lab that we just revamped is 3 days, 8 hours a day. So it's an intensive 24-hour instructional period over a 3-day weekend.
Is that restorative stuff?
Yeah, it's the one where we teach how to build the skull and the face.
Wow.
So, and it used to be taught over a 15-week trimester. So we now condense that down into a tight, really intense program. So now we have those on weekends. So really those come around about 4 times a year maybe.
Yeah.
And because it's for our campus and our online students. So that's one weekend, usually about every quarter that I'm working. And then also I teach embalming labs, which always involves being on call 1 weekend a month. So that right there will usually eat up 2 weekends out of every month.
Yeah.
Just those kind of classes. And then we do, it's wild. Even our school schedule changed because of what's going on. We used to have classes until 1:30. Now we go all day. We go like 7:30 to 4. But you're only there 2 days a week.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, this.
Do you prefer that?
It's interesting. I don't teach classroom lecture anymore. I teach online and just these lab classes. So
Before we get into this, explain for the people who might not know who you are, what you do.
Gotcha. Okay. So
we got into all the pepper talk and everything.
So my main profession is a funeral director, and I also worked as a forensic death investigator. I'm technically retired from that, just not active in it right now. But I used to teach that, and I currently teach people how to be funeral directors. And my specialty is embalming and restorative art. And restorative art is rebuilding people that have had trauma pathology. So we have one of the oldest schools in the country here in Pittsburgh. I think we're the third oldest, if I'm not mistaken. And we have a very innovative program for our restorative art. And it's since I was on the program last time, we have completely renovated it. And it is state of the art. We can finally say that. And it involves learning to rebuild the head in a way that's never really been offered before.
Yeah.
We always taught people how to sculpt each individual feature of the face. Okay. Everyone's got a nose, eyes, mouth, ears, eyebrows, eyelashes. Okay. So we would show people how to do that from a sculpture standpoint. But then the trick was, how do you rebuild somebody's entire head if you need to some extent? Okay?
Yeah.
And we would always have people choose a person, whether real, like a celebrity or somebody they knew, and they would literally have to sculpt their whole head.
Oh, okay.
Which is a sculpture class. It's not a restorative art class. So we thought, how can we change it? And we thought we need to make an analog head that has trauma on it already, and then you have to restore the parts that are bad to the parts that are good. Because that's how we work. We take what's good and what's bad and find a happy medium. So we developed with a special effects artist, some synthetic heads, like analog human heads, like with shoulders and everything.
Yeah.
And we thought about, okay, what are the most common forms of trauma and pathology we see in our line of work? So usually you're looking at gunshot wounds of some sort, stabbing wounds, blunt force or sharp force trauma from like a car accident, kind of like road rash, and then natural pathology such as cancer. So we looked at all those and we said, okay, I have photos of all this from all my years in pathology work. Some of them were evidence in cases, things like that have been cleared. So we sent these photos to the special effects artist and said, make this for us as realistic as you possibly can.
Wow.
So he used a formulation of latex that's a little different than what you would find in a prop or a mask, because we said you need to make it as real as human skin is when it's embalmed. Okay, and that's an odd request. Okay, that's an odd thing, because if you don't know what that is, so we kind of had to describe to him what we wanted. And he sent us a prototype that was pretty good.
This might be a dumb question. I'm probably going to interrupt you at some points, but whenever you do restorative stuff in real life, do you embalm a person before you do the restorative?
Yes.
Okay.
And that's a component that it's so important from a chemistry factor. Okay?
Yeah.
It's something we drill into our students. You ask a student that's come through our class, what are the 3 words you heard the most while you were at PIMS? It's firm, clean, and dry. Okay. Tissue has to be firm, clean, and dry for you to be able to do anything with it in a restorative capacity.
So the reason that you were saying like make these like an embalmed body is because the skin is going to be different than like a regular human's body now.
Exactly. Right.
Okay.
The skin won't be as elastic. It'll be a little tighter.
Yeah.
And because what we're doing when embalming is we're just removing moisture from the muscle tissues, just kind of firming it up a little like that so it doesn't break down. And so it was interesting to get the right texture and kind of, feel to these heads. And it turns out, the only thing we didn't really like was there wasn't enough trauma. That was our issue. It was too nice. So we said, the next one, you need to go a little bigger, a little deeper, make it worse. Okay. So each one he sent us became progressively better. And the wild thing is, he works down in Nashville, I think, and he would drive these up in his car because it's an odd thing to ship. Okay?
Yeah,
because there's no container for it. He would literally load them up in the trunk of his car. There'd be like 15 heads in this car.
Wow.
And he'd drive up and hand deliver them to us. And it was really great because every time we'd get to talk to him, we'd kind of say, hey, this is what we liked about this one. And so it was direct contact. There was, no middleman with the production. And so each one got a little better. And we even got approval for a 5th one. We're like, we need to kind of shock our students as much as we can. So we actually did a dog attack victim that was a 13-year-old girl.
Jesus.
And it's a scary thing to think about.
Yeah, but you got to know how to do it.
It's the closest you can get to that before it ends up in front of you for real.
Yeah.
And so that shock value, we want to try to impose that as much as we can. We're not trying to traumatize people.
No, but you want to let people know.
Real. We need to be real.
Yeah.
And this leads into something that we just introduced to our students for the first time on Wednesday, Saturday, or no, it was Thursday. Basically, we have our students, they start embalming in their second semester, okay? They literally learn about it in the first term. You see an observation in your first term, and in second term, you are actually in the laboratory embalming people, okay? It's that real.
Wow.
And so we have to make sure that everybody is mentally, physically, spiritually prepared for what this is going to,
for sure,
bring out in you. Because everyone has a different experience with seeing a dead body for the first time in an embalming capacity. It's different than seeing your grandmother made up with her hair done in a casket.
Yeah.
Okay. So
do you have experiences where people will go through school and think everything is all right and then get to that point and then have to like it changes them completely?
You have to drop out. Yeah, absolutely.
Wow.
And it's not a common occurrence, but it's something that we want to address as early as possible. Okay?
Yeah.
And we used to wait until halfway, 3/4 through your first term before you got to do the observation. We realize it has to be sooner. All right. So we have a new class in our school right now. They're just finishing their third week of class. And we said, we need to introduce this as early as possible. We're going to do this as quick as possible. Problem, well, and it's a good problem to have, is we have record enrollment in our school right now. For some reason, this plague has made people realize that our industry is stable and it's not going anywhere.
Yeah.
And that we didn't stop working.
People be dying.
If we stopped, there would be mass graves, just like in New York City.
Yeah.
So it's one of the perks of all this horribleness is people are realizing that funeral service it's never going away and people are going to die. And so we have this enrollment now that's through the roof. We've never had a wait list for our campus program before. Online program, very common for us to have a wait list.
How many students can you have on campus?
Okay. Campus, we usually have about 120 to 130 students on campus. Small building, very small building. Online, about the same number. And we have to really limit our online classes. We want them to be well structured, and we want a good teacher to student ratio.
Yeah.
Okay. Because we're not teaching gen ed, we're teaching very specialized.
Yeah, so it can't
classes.
be like a crazy lecture where you're one person's teaching to 100 people online.
There you go. That's what gen ed classes at Penn State, things like that. You have these broad scopes. You never met.
Personally, that was always something that would never do anything for me. I never got anything from a class like that.
Yeah, you want to meet your professor. You want to be able to
100%.
have intellectual dissertations,
Real conversations with them. Yeah,
and that's how you learn. And so we try to structure those very small. We expanded the class size a little bit, but we think it's pretty manageable.
Yeah.
And I've never had a class that I felt was too large from being an online instructor. So online classes always have a wait list. Now, we've had so many that we decided to run a second class in January now. We have so many people that apply. We now do a double class.
Wow.
Which has it's made us have to expand and get new instructors, things
For
like
sure.
that. So now we've had this influx of people over the past year that have now caused a wait list on campus.
and this has never happened.
In the 7 years I've been there, 8 years I've been there, I've never heard of there being a wait list on campus.
Wow.
There was one class that was about the same size right before I started teaching. That was really big, but it was an anomaly. And we had to roll people over to spring. Our spring classes start in January. They're already half filled right now.
Wow.
It's that intense. Like every day, because I work in enrollment now, and literally have to go through the admissions process. I'm one of the people that kind of literally goes through their files and looks and determines, are they a good candidate for our program?
Yeah.
And so that's every day I have 5, 6, 7 applications land on my desk that I need to process. And it's amazing. So it's, like I said, it's a good problem to have. But when we do these, these laboratories, when we do these things, we have to make sure that we have enough instructors for the students. That once again, it's that student to teacher ratio, and what is that? What are they experiencing?
Yeah, you got to uphold that quality.
So now we have this class of 70 something students that need to come over and see an observation embalming. Okay, we have a lab.
Meaning someone is going to go embalm a body somewhere.
And they're gonna come watch Other
Okay,
people
yeah.
do it. They're going to watch the upperclassmen and ahead of them.
Oh, okay,
embalm.
yeah.
Okay, now we have a lab that has 4 workstations in it, so we can embalm 4 people at one time if we want. Okay, you're going to get a maximum of 4 students standing around that table, in addition to the 2 or 3 students and the instructor working at the table. It's tight. Imagine if we were in this room and there was a table like this and a table like that.
I immediately
next to
think of
us.
a doctor's table and everyone in around.
It is. It's like almost like a surgical
Yeah.
kind of setting. So, but you're not going. If you're down at the foot of the table,
You're not gonna see everything up top.
see exactly what's going on, and there's a lot more going on at the head than there is at the foot in what we do. So, we thought, how are we going to get all these students in there to see these embalmings in a timely manner? It'll take the whole semester to get them in there because it's a luck of the draw with us. We never know when someone's going to come to us for embalming. We say, death is a very, difficult mistress. She shows up when she wants. Like literally, you can't ever time things. You know, it's when will the person die? When will they arrive? So we have to bet on that fact that we're going to have 4 guests that we're going to take care of that day are going to show up when we schedule an observation.
I didn't even think about that.
We were like, how are we going to do this? So we came up with it, and my coworkers put it together. We decided we have an event center that's it's a big auditorium, and it's where we hold, orientation for our students, where we have events where we have like a welcome party, or when funeral directors need to have continuing education credits every year. Depending on what state you live in, there's a certain amount you have to get.
Oh, okay.
And it's just like what's new in the industry, what's something you need to keep sharp on. So they have them every year. Well, we have those events at our school, and we've had 2 in the past year where we did a live embalming demonstration right there in the event center. It's all set up. We have a workstation where we can just bring an embalming table and embalming machine in and do a presentation. So we have those. Well, we decided, why not do that for our students? So we did. We shut down classes for a half a day. We secured a person that we can embalm for, and we brought them in and we set it up on the 3rd floor and had all of our students there, and they got to see the whole procedure over a 4-hour period of how it goes from start to finish.
What do you mean? So this is a kind of a side tangent, but what do you mean you secure a person? Like, where do these people come from?
Okay, yeah. How do we get people? Right?
Yeah, I mean, like, is this a family member, or is this like a Jane Doe type thing?
Okay, so the way it works is the school has a cooperative with the medical examiner's office.
Okay.
That's a big connection for us. And what they do is, if you are an unclaimed decedent at the medical examiner's office, okay, I think the timeline is usually 48 to 72 hours. If you are unclaimed in their morgue, and there's a large unclaimed morgue there, okay?
So this is a common thing?
Yes, unfortunately, really is.
Really?
And because we have a large homeless population here in Pittsburgh.
I guess that's a good point. Yeah, I didn't
which is
think about
seasonal.
that.
It's a seasonal one. But you'd be surprised at how many people end up unclaimed for periods of time.
Yeah, plus like elderly people who might not have family or anything.
Exactly. People with drug issues.
Yeah.
And they've estranged themselves from their family and friends. Okay?
Oh, yeah.
That's a common one.
Jesus.
And so they might not even know that person has died. Okay. So they're down there, and what the medical examiner's office does, they determine when that person should be sent to us. Okay. Because we want to make sure that in the chance that they are claimed, that somebody does come looking for them, that they are presentable and identifiable. Okay, so they send them up to us. Our students get to learn how to embalm. That person gets preserved well enough that hopefully,
that makes
someone
sense.
will come
Like
find
someone can't just have them. They can't just have them in a morgue and let them without being embalmed for.
Right.
Like, how long does a body last before it needs to be embalmed?
Well, that's the determination they have to make down there. Refrigeration only slows and retards decomposition or pathological conditions.
Yeah.
It won't stop it. It can also exacerbate certain conditions. Okay. If people are in there too long, and if there is moisture, okay, excess moisture maybe inside the body pouch or inside the cooler, or the cooler isn't regulated well enough, mold will form.
Oh, wow.
And I remember we have actually had to reject cases from the medical examiner's office due to the danger component of the mold. Like, there was so much mold in the bag that we would have to put on like a Tyvek suit and a respirator. And we can't expose our students to that.
Yeah.
Because we don't have that equipment for them. I have all that for myself.
Yeah.
Because I've been around those things. But they don't have that, and we can't risk them being exposed to
Yeah, and you got a mass of students. You can't, that's a big, cost to do all that.
Exactly. And so So the medical examiner has to make that careful determination on each individual case. What condition are they in? How long do we think they'll last? But yeah, so they send us a lot of cases. Okay?
Wow.
They also will send us cases where maybe like they're called, that's what we call a storage case. Okay. They also will send us cases that have been autopsied that are usually like involved in like homicides or trauma and things like that. And those come to us through funeral homes usually, okay? The funeral home will say, we have a family here that, really can't afford a full funeral service. So what we do is we embalm for them for free, okay? So then with that component of the funeral service is taken away monetarily, and then they can just pay for the visitation, everything else they need to be able to memorialize their loved one. So that's almost like a community service we offer in an indirect way. So you would not believe we handle at least 250 cases a year just for funeral homes in that capacity.
Wow.
So that's something that we, it's a great way for our students to learn. You know what I mean? They get that kind of safety net. We also handle cases through the Center for Organ Recovery and Education, which is known as CORE.
Yeah.
So if you were an organ or tissue donor in southwestern Pennsylvania, that's the organization that would facilitate that. We work very closely with them to help educate our students on how to handle those cases, okay? Because organ and tissue donation has changed even in the years that I've been in the industry. It's become more intense, okay?
I tried to get someone on. They said that they couldn't really talk about it.
Their umbrella of, I guess, scrutiny is tremendous because they're dealing with the living and the dead.
Absolutely.
And the intermediary parts of that. They are under so much regulations. Yeah, several of my students that I trained in the autopsy program I taught in work there.
Yeah.
They're like the trainers. They're like the supervisors now because they've been there long enough. And I would, try to talk to them about what some procedures were. They're very tight-lipped.
Yeah, that's what they said. They were like, I would be happy to, but, we just can't do that.
Right.
And I just talked to a kid that went to high school with my brother is the one that found Kodiak the eagle.
Oh, no way.
Yeah, he's a trainer at the aviary, and I was like, yo, dude, I was like, I would, and I messaged him a few months ago before all this even happened. I was like, look, dude, I'm not just like some PR trying to get a quick one. I was like, I messaged you a minute ago, just look at this. And he was like, hey, dude, we're under it's people with the zoos, people with like the aviary.
It's national. It's a federal thing at the aviary.
Yeah, so. And it's like people are crazy as far as like, they're under scrutiny too because they have animals in cages and everything. He was like, I just can't do it. He was like, I would be happy to, but I can't.
Yeah, it's interesting. And that's the one thing we have to tell our students too is you will not believe how many cases we work on that are in the news and the media. Every day. I get up and watch the news every morning because half the time a case that's on the news will end up in our care. We tell our students that you have to be very cautious about what you share with friends, family, anybody because of the confidentiality factors involved with what we do.
Now, as far as stuff like that, I would assume that, if a body like that is coming into the school and being, embalmed through that, do you guys get information or are they just like...
It's varying. We get limited information, and I think about that.
The reason I ask that, I'm sorry. The reason I ask that is because, I assume that if a body is involved in like a homicide or something like that, they have to be you have to be very careful of not contaminating evidence or anything like that.
Okay, so if there's a criminal case, or something where there's been some sort of something that needs investigated. That will be done before they come to us.
Oh, okay.
Very rarely do we come across, I think it's happened to me like once or twice, where I came across a case at the funeral home where I said, wow, there seems something off here. We need to check with the coroner or the medical examiner to find out, was there a scene investigation thing? And that's just because I worked in criminal investigation as a forensic investigator. I can pick up things that the average person necessarily wouldn't. Even funeral directors aren't trained in that, and there's a misconception about that people are trained forensically if they're in funeral service. Okay, there's a lot of misconception that they cross paths. Okay, they can, but it's a very different educational component. But that's the thing is, by the time they get to us, everything should be done from an investigative side.
Oh, okay.
The one part of that does play well for us, okay, because embalming does disrupt the investigation component where you're not going to be able to take a toxicological screen, urine, blood, bile, all that will be compromised from the embalming chemicals.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, if they're looking for trauma or pathology, it will be expertly preserved because of the embalming. And that's one thing. Yeah, it's funny. When I used to teach, forensic investigation classes, I used to say that sometimes you might be working on a body that's been embalmed. And I said, you're gonna lose on some part, but you're gonna win on other sides, because trauma and pathology will be preserved very well. Certain dyes that we use will infuse into certain like traumatic, pathologies that will then stick out for us, like a bruise. Like our dyes will go into a bruise.
Wow.
And you'll see it super bright. It'll stand out. So, yeah, it's kind of interesting. But when we get those cases sometimes that are like a homicide or like, there's a lot of suicides that are not in the news, things like that. So our students come across this, and for them, I think they get excited because they're like, wow, I saw this on the news, and they want to talk about it. And we tell them, you can't discuss this with anybody.
Yeah, for
you really
sure.
Can't, because you never know who knows somebody else. Okay. And I think about those experiences I've had, cases I've worked on over the years where I met people that were involved with them in one capacity or another down the road.
Yeah, it's a small city.
Oh, and
everyone knows everyone.
Oh, I think it was profound because it was a case very early on. I was in school. I was in mortuary school still when I was working at the pathology lab, kind of doing an internship at this point. And it was the very first case where I actually took photographs that were used as evidence. And that night I was watching the news, which is rare. I don't usually watch the news in the evening, but I was watching the news, and all of a sudden I look over and I see pictures that I took on the news. It was a news conference because it was going to be a civil trial instead of a criminal trial, but it was an officer-involved homicide where they basically killed this guy, and it was going to civil trial, but they were showing these photos that I took that afternoon. It was like surreal.
Yeah.
And within 2 years of that, I was having a beer down at Fatheads one day, and struck up a conversation with the guy next to me, because, of course, I was talking to my friend, the bartender, and he heard us, and he's like, what do you do for a living? Because he heard casual conversation. And I said, oh, well, here's what I do. And he was like, wow. And start talking a little, and it turns out that that was his best friend, that guy that was killed.
Jesus.
That we did that investigation on. And we kind of like bonded around. We would see each other occasionally there just over the years.
Yeah.
But that was just one of those things where I was like, wow.
Yeah, small world.
That's frightening that guy was his best friend growing up and all that. So it's kind of interesting. And I think about that. I mentioned that Lincoln Avenue brewing place that I like to go to. I've met so many people there that have a very strange spiderwebbed connection to me somehow.
That's what it is. Everything's a spider web.
It is. It's amazing. Like I said, I go there, on weekends, and I've just struck up casual conversations with people, and it's amazing where they go sometimes. And you're like, wow, I never would have imagined this person knew that person.
Yeah. Let me ask you this. So, as PIMS, goes through and, educates people to handle situations like this, do you guys focus on the mental health of this, that side of the career at all? Because I recently spoke with a veterinarian, and she talked to me about the suicide rate in veterinarians on a crazy rise.
Wow, that's scary.
Yeah, and it makes sense because it's a person pours, their passions into a career to help animals that are like that. And it's the career that you're in is heavy. You know what I mean? It's definitely heavy. And mental health is it was never something that was very, very talked upon up until probably 6-7 years ago. So is that something that's implemented?
Absolutely. And I think about that. When I was in school, I was kind of trained by a lot of old school guys. I fell into more of an old school path than some of my classmates because I was being trained by pathologists and things like that in the forensics side. And forensics is more rough around the edges and how people are handled. You know what I mean? Because we're there to find out what happened.
Yeah.
So not that we're depersonalizing people, but we don't care about anything on that side of psychology or feelings. It's all about how did this person die when you figure it out.
Yeah, okay? You're trying to find
It's a cold focus. It's odd. It's odd to say that. Funeral service is the polar opposite. We are caring for the living and the dead more for the living, you know what I mean? But it's that ultimate respect of caring for that dead individual. We might be the last person that ever sees them, literally, okay? So it's a and I explain to my students, right, the fictionalization of what you see on TV doesn't really go into that as much. But I said, all I want you to do is pay attention when you do have an interaction with like a coroner or something like that. Watch how they handle the body. Watch how they move the body. They're a little rougher. We are so gentle. You know what I mean? I think about how would you move your grandmother off a bed onto a cot? You know what I mean? Always take that component into your thought process. And so the psychology and the mental preparedness is something that we're focusing on more than ever. We're in the middle of a healthcare crisis, like a mental healthcare crisis. Prior to, the COVID plague happening, our country was just unhinging. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think when the lockdown happened, I went through it. I went through a major depressive state going into and out of the lockdown because I lost a lot of my social components and friends and contacts and things like that.
Yeah.
And I haven't regained some of them. So I got myself out of that. But I understand, like, the toll this is taking on people on top of what was already existing. Okay?
Yeah.
So it just exacerbated anything happening. And we now, literally one of the slogans that we are using at the school that we're promoting is, "Are you ready?" Okay. And are you ready physically? Because it is a physical job, moving a dead person. Dead weight.
Yeah, dead weight.
There's no handles. And it's very interesting to learn when we train people how to do that now. We have a whole day dedicated to it. Okay?
Oh, wow. I didn't even think about that. How to maneuver a body.
We have a rescue dummy that firefighters and paramedics use to train with. He's 175 pounds of unevenly distributed dead weight. Okay. He's brutal. Like, I'm pretty strong.
Yeah.
Like, I work out, things like that. But moving him just around it is difficult.
Yeah, it doesn't matter if you grab a bag that's filled with water. You know what I mean? Yeah. It's harder to. It don't matter if it's 40 pounds or not. It's hard to handle that.
Exactly, and it moves and it shifts.
Yeah,
so, and that's the wild thing. So and he has a weight vest. We can even increase him up to like 200 pounds. We've never even put it on him.
Yeah,
but we have a whole day where we train people how to lift him and how to do it respectfully. Okay?
Yeah,
and that sometimes is a mental thing. You're so focused on doing the mechanics of it that you're not thinking about this is going to be a person eventually, okay? So that's where we start doing it that. Are you physically ready? The mental component, we ask students now, we have a barrage of questions that are interview questions that we start from the admissions standpoint now that we used to do once you were accepted.
Yeah.
Now it's at admissions. Why do you want to be a funeral director? What's your direct experience with death? Are you mentally and physically ready for this? Because it's taxing. It's stressful as a student because no matter what, you're going to college. We have students that are 18 years old coming right out of high school. Okay?
Yeah.
Up to, I think we have a student that's right around 60 right now. Okay. So look at that broad range there. Okay. But everyone has their own stress levels, things like that. So, right, we ask everybody. A big thing we ask people is, have you had a recent experience with death? Okay. Because we do. We have people that come into the program because their father died, because their friend, their sister, and they want to make the change. And they either had good funeral service or bad funeral service, and that's their motivator. So what we tell them, are you ready? Because what you're going to learn in this school every day is going to be very intense.
Yeah.
We're going to be talking about psychological components of death that you might have not gone through yet if it's too fresh. So we have to have those frank conversations with people where, like, you might want to wait a year before enrolling because your death experience is so new.
Yeah.
So
might trigger you.
Seriously, we've seen that before. And I've even had moments where I'm discussing things in class and I almost tear up because it like hits me for a second, something that was connected to my father's death. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So we have to be very careful when we screen people. And our number one request in student surveys and things like that has been, more counseling available, more mental health services. So we have taken that into consideration. One of my new positions in the school is a student advisor, actually.
Oh,
and
nice.
So if some student has something non-academic that they want to discuss, they can come to me. Our administrative staff is we have open doors, and we welcome people to come in and talk to us because we don't want things to build up. We don't want you to get, to a point where you feel like you're going to have a breakdown.
Yeah, and overwhelmed.
Yeah, because you won't be able to serve people if you're not okay.
Exactly.
And that's the one thing that was missing from my training from the old school guys.
Yeah, I mean, back then it's,
They said, you don't cry, you don't show emotion here. And I was like, wow. They actually said that verbally to me.
Yeah.
So I can only imagine what young women our hearing, okay? And our enrollment is 80% female right now.
Really?
That is the new future of funeral service is women, okay?
Wow.
That's who's...
How recent of a change is that?
I would say working in administration, I've seen it really swing hard in the past 5 years.
Oh, wow.
But literally the last 2 years, our enrollment has been 75 to 80% women, and they're going to change the industry in a much better way, I think.
Why do you think that, though? I mean, not change the industry, but why do you think such a big shift in a women-driven career like this?
Well, here's the thing. It was always a male-dominated and family industry generated business.
Yeah.
It was the father, son,
Been in the family for years.
I mean, we have people that are 4th, 5th generation funeral directors.
Yeah.
Going back to the Civil War. So that for some reason has declined. And I know when I was in school, there were statistics coming out that 3rd and 4th generation funeral directors had a 75% failure rate. Okay. One of the reasons that has been kind of thrown around that is they kind of grew up in it and they knew they were going to own it, okay?
Yeah, they were shepherded into it.
You see your name on the sign, you know it's yours.
Yeah, exactly.
And it was kind of like a silver spoon mentality, I think. So I don't know. It's just poor business management is my guess, okay? But now, so you're seeing the shift where you're not seeing, I think in our current class, we have 2 or 3 students out of those 70 new students that have family affiliations. It's that small.
Wow.
It's that small. And that's a flip from when I was in school 13, 14 years ago. There was a quarter of our class were from funeral homes.
Yeah.
So now you're seeing more affiliations where it's the daughter or the granddaughters coming to school, if it's a family, okay? Or they just know somebody that lives in a funeral home or works there or something like that, or that it's just a neighbor, but it's just people coming into it that want to make a change.
Yeah, it's like you have like that first, that most recent generation of younger people being involved with it and doing it, like Sarah, who is kind of like I don't know, that's one of the main reasons I wanted to talk to her, because it's like I usually would think of like a Vincent Price looking like creeper type guy, but it's like, she is, this like hip, woman who has a, Steve Martin biography book, and I'm just like, this is the type of person that, she almost makes it seem like it's okay to do things like that. Like you don't have to be a friggin' weirdo to do this.
And that's the one thing that we try to and that's the thing.
Normalize it.
I grew up with those old school guys that, you do think of that stoic, creepy kind of funeral director back in the corner,
Yeah.
And that's, I think the stereotype, it's being broken, and that's what's going to really do it is these younger women coming in. And I think about that. Like I already have students of mine that are now instructors at the school, which is so awesome to see somebody you taught come in and to take over. And one of them, she breaks the mold of funeral director. It's kind of like how you talked about how Sarah's kind of like, they're young, they're hip, they don't look, you wouldn't be like, oh my God, they look like a funeral director. You're like, wow, you're a funeral director. Okay?
Yeah.
Because she has tattoos, she has sleeves, nose rings when she's not at work, and it's funny, that's what these young women can look at and say, wow, I can be her. I can do what she's doing. They're not looking at me like that. You know what I mean? It's a whole generational thing.
Yeah.
And so that's the one thing as an advisor is I tell my students, I can't tell you what it's like to be a woman in a male-dominated industry, but you're about to change it. It's going to flip. You're going to run it soon. So I said, that's who you need to talk to if you have other questions about that, is these women that are your role models now. They're in our school. They're the instructors now.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of great to be able to see, right, no matter what their questions are, we can guide them to somebody that can help further them, in the profession.
Yeah, that's super cool.
And so I think, and it's not trying to be like stereotypical, but women are just more caring and have more caring capacity than guys do. It's how we're raised. And I think that the more of the positive psychology side is going to come through in that too. I think they're going to be better dealing with families and being able to absorb grief and, help them deal with things. Whereas, like I said, when I was trained to, we don't cry, we don't show emotion.
We don't show emotion back then.
We're not going to hug people and all this. Whereas, like, I can't tell you how many times, like, I've gotten hugs from people after offering funeral service to them. And it's like, you can't reject that. That makes you look dead and cold and uncaring. So
it's wild to think that anyone ever said that to you.
Yeah. And so there's the change there. And I think it's an old school. We're always outdated and we're always behind.
Absolutely.
We're always a couple decades behind because it's so old and so, fixed here. So I think that change is going to be tremendous. I mean, I remember a few years ago, there was one woman-owned and run funeral business in Pittsburgh. And it was this big anomaly. Okay, it was this wild thing. We used to take students there for field trips for school to show them, look, this is a new thing. It's commonplace now.
Yeah.
There's places they don't even necessarily advertise it, but it's all women running the place inside and out. And one of them was a place I used to work at years ago where it was run by an old school guy, and it is a fundamentally different place now. So I think that's the thing, is we're trying to prepare them in every way possible to say, like, look, you're going to make this better than we did.
Yeah.
And that's part of it, is the physical, the mental, the spiritual, readiness of this. So getting them introduced to the, I guess, I don't want to say the scary things, because there's nothing scary in what we do.
The shocking things.
But the anxiety of seeing that embalming for the first time is overwhelming. You know what I mean? The first time you actually see somebody make an incision into a body is tremendous. It's this wild thing that you only see fictionalized on TV or horror movies, you know?
Yeah.
And so the first time you see it and hear it, it's a tactile experience. So that's one thing we were doing with our students the other day during this embalming observation was I stood behind everybody and was watching people's reactions to make sure how they responded. And luckily, everyone did really well. But it's the kind of thing where that's something we're going to now introduce now is we can do that. Why only offer it for these special occasions where we know, let's do it for our students. So we're going to start to look at doing that. We're also we're actually able to record and photograph these operations we do at the school for educational purposes, not only within the school. Like, we have videos of how to do everything we do there. And we are able to offer those to the students through a secure portal so they can watch these, so they learn how to do everything we do from top to bottom. And another thing, this is the most exciting thing I think I've done pretty much in my career so far, is the textbook that is used in embalming schools across the country. Okay, I think there's 52, I can't remember if there's 52 programs, 48 in the country right now, but they use a standard embalming text, okay? And it was written in the 70s, and it's in its 6th edition, is going to be coming out this next year. This textbook has always been written out of our school.
Yeah.
Okay. It was always written by a guy. Started and all first 5 editions were done by a guy named Bob Mayer, and he's like kind of a legend in the industry. He went to the Cincinnati school, which is I think the oldest school in the country. They're older than us. He came to our school and taught there for 30 years. And he wrote this textbook out of the school up until a few years ago. He decided to retire. So when they needed a new editor for it, it actually ended up contacting someone who was a close friend of our school that had just retired from another mortuary school, named Sharon G. Mascarello. And she decided she was going to take on this editor position, which is this intense thing, because you have to modernize it from what was done last time. And a lot of things have changed in the past couple of years. So one thing that needed done on that update was they needed new photographs taken because they were still black and white.
Yeah.
And most of them were from the 70s or the 80s.
Wow.
They were so grainy.
Yeah, you can't tell what's going on at all.
These are available online. You can find them online readily. People have downloaded them. You can't see anything. There was a color section that had some updates, and that was about it. And I think the 5th edition came out right around the time that I would have started at the school. So about 7 or 8 years ago is when it was released. So there's been updates.
Pull up on that mic just a little bit, please.
Sure. So basically, she said, I need photographs. And you have a lab where you have over 500 decedents a year.
Yeah.
And you see every kind of condition you can possibly imagine. I need photographs. She said, I need every single black and white photograph from edition 5 replicated in high def color.
Wow.
And then she said, in addition, I want other things that were never included that should be in there or that are new that were never introduced. So I think I took about, over the past 2 years, probably a good 600-700 photographs.
Really?
And every week we do a download up into Dropbox, submit them, and the textbook is being released on March 18th of 2022.
Wow. Congratulations.
We literally just got the notification. It's available on Amazon for pre-order. It's wild. I got the little ad from her. She sent it to me the other day. I think it was, what day was that? Saturday. Yeah, it was last Saturday. And so it's just so exciting to actually see the cover.
Yeah.
See the change on it, things like that. And it got even realer because I also got the release forms from the publisher that I had to sign off on.
Wow.
So that was really exciting. So
that's like the book.
it's the textbook used. And so I'm not the only photographer. I'm one of the primaries, but it's wild. We got to document everything that happened over the past year and a half. So we have a whole chapter on COVID and things like that.
Oh my goodness. I didn't even think about that.
Every variant. We also saw what was really disturbing about COVID was the shift in patient care that we would see. The condition of people coming in from hospitals and nursing homes was a little frightening.
Jesus.
And it's still going on. Like it's still happening. There was a case I had this week that was really bad. And it's kind of shown an unpleasant light on healthcare. But it was such a benefit for us to be able to be documenting this book during this time. Because we got everything we needed and so much more. We have photographs banked up for the 7th edition already.
Wow.
So yeah, that was one thing, but that's with these cases, the guests we take care of, the family sign off on a waiver saying we were able to photograph and film them for educational purposes, and we anonymize them as much as possible.
Wow.
So you can't tell that that's mom. You know what I mean? But what an amazing benefit to the students and to the educational component of our industry to be able to do that. So that's one thing that, it's weird. We never get to thank these people. So like, I'd like to thank all the people that ever have, allowed their loved ones to come to us over the years. We serve 500 something people a year. So think about that. That's thousands and thousands and thousands of people that have helped us.
Really incredible.
And our students have benefited from it so much. And so it's something to think about, I tell people donate your body to science, but yeah, if you,
Will you donate your body to science?
I actually literally have signed up for it. I am actually going to the original body farm in Tennessee.
What?
Yeah. It's funny.
What's the process of this?
Well, okay, so scientific donation is a very broad scope. Okay, you have to read the paperwork very well on scientific body donation. Okay, because usually what I tell people is you want to provide a forensic service or a training service to somebody by donation. Okay?
Yeah.
So normally, if you just do generic body donation to like scientific surgical dissection, okay, it's called the HGR program. And it's called Human Gift Registry because it's a gift of your body, okay? And you get embalmed in a very different way than we do for funeral service, okay? You get over-embalmed and you basically become an anonymous person, okay? They shave all of your hair off, okay? And they embalm you in a way that you can't even see it. Like we hide the incision somewhere so that it looks like a normal body that's very generic.
Yeah.
Okay. Because you don't want to associate this with, hey, that looks like Jim from next door.
Yeah.
You want to have it be person. It's weird because you're going to dissect this person. Okay. And it's an odd thing. Like I said, the first time you dissect somebody.
Look like Neo whenever he comes out of that pod.
Yeah. Like you're this generic person. Okay. And it's an odd thing to think about, but there's how you disconnect yourself from what you're doing. Okay. A psychological component of what we do. So that is the generic body donation process. You can get very specific to where you say, okay, I would like my body to be used for ballistic testing with the military.
Oh my God. You could do this.
You can have just your arm donated to that. Like you can piece yourself out. It's astounding and something you sit down with an attorney and write out in paperwork. But what I did with mine was since I worked in forensic, investigation for years, you always latch on to a certain component of forensics, and that's usually what you get your master's or your doctorate in.
Yeah.
Specialize in.
Let me guess yours. Insects
and bones. Yeah.
Because I remember whenever you told me the last time that we talked, you told me about a case where something was like a breakthrough because of the moth.
The fly
that was on there, that is like a certain tell of like how the time frame of the body has been there. And I remember it blowing my damn mind.
Yep. So that's forensic entomology, the study of insects interacting with death. Okay.
Wow.
So, and I could have done that. Penn State has a master's. They have a really great program up there. So I thought about that. And I thought about, I love forensic anthropology. The skeleton bones are just the skulls are just the coolest thing in the universe. So I thought about doing those. And then I realized, oh man, it's so competitive. I'm almost like, I was in my 40s. I'm like, I got to get a master's, then a doctorate.
Yeah.
Then you have to find somewhere where there's no competition in the field. Well, Pennsylvania is rife with forensic anthropologists and entomologists. So I'm like, oh yeah, I'm too old to do this. So
Wait. So you're saying that there's a lot of people that do this.
There's a concentration in southwestern Pennsylvania because Mercyhurst University offers a master's and a doctorate in forensic anthropology.
Oh, wow.
And
the Buffalo Bill House is here. No,
exactly.
I'm just kidding.
Oh, it's right down the street from a funeral home.
I know. I just drove by it the other day.
Did you go? Okay.
I drove by, yeah.
Yeah. Periopolis is where it's at. But it's funny, up there at Mercyhurst, two of the guys, the doctors that run it, it's Dr. Symes and Dr. Dirkmatt, are trainees from the original Body Farm in Tennessee. Okay, that was where forensic anthropology training began in the 70s.
What a name, the original Body Farm. I would love a T-shirt with that.
Oh, well, there's it's been fictionalized in books by Patricia Cromwell. That's where she actually came up with the name for it. She knew the guy that started the whole program's his name was Bill Bass. He's like the guy that started it, and he's written fiction books about it. There's actual like crime fiction books about it.
Oh, wow.
There's also ones that talk about the real Body Farm. Okay. So they started this in the 70s at the University of Tennessee, and it's called the Anthropological, Investigative Study. And what they do is they have the first book I think was called Death's Acre. Okay, they had 1 acre of land dedicated to their study group, and it was just fenced in. And they literally would get somebody to donate their body, and they would just set it out and let it decompose. Okay, and insects interact, and they go out every day and study the body head to toe and determine the decomposition factors and how the body broke down, what the bugs did with the timing, and that's how you start to learn how bodies decompose, how insects interact with them, what the pathology in the body was pre-existing, because every person will have their own chemistry mixture, and that's how they started figuring out. So the more donors they got, the more they figured out how each person died and how they decompose. So they would do a different study every term. They would say, okay, this time we're going to study how somebody would decompose inside a car. So they'd set them in the seat and let them decompose. They'd put them in the trunk. You know what I mean? Recreating crime scenes.
My goodness.
Recreating how people have been discovered at scenes.
Yeah.
They would submerge them in water, put them in a tree. You know what
I
I mean?
read about it in water before with a study where they put like a body at the bottom of the ocean or something like that, and studied like the parasites and all
Crabs.
the fish, all that stuff, and like how long it would take. And it makes a lot of sense because these types of things, but until you do something like this, you don't really have a timeline and like a case study of knowing, you don't really know how long it is. So these studies, man, that's such a cool thing.
Well, it's wild. And I think about, you just never think about those kind of things.
Yeah,
and
at all.
It's weird. So they started doing that, and it became groundbreaking. And then I think there's like 7 or 10 body farms all over the country, and they all specialize in a different field of research. I know University of North Carolina has one at Chapel Hill. I think they do more water-based research, things like that. But yeah, they're all over the place now. And so it's a wild thing where people want to get their body donated to those, okay? So I signed up for the Body Farm years ago thinking maybe I'll get in because they have a waiting list.
Yeah.
Because everyone wants to do it now.
Yeah.
So I signed up for it, and it's wild. You do this intense. They want all your medical records.
They have a waiting list. This is crazy.
Oh, it's wild. And you send all this stuff in, and they say yes or no. When I got in, and I was like, I bet you it's probably because of what
they turn people away.
Mm-hmm. And I'm like, they let me in, and I'm like, it's probably because of what I do. And I'm like, hey, that's awesome. That's cool. Get a little, little plug there.
Yeah.
But then they sent me a thing saying, hey, we're actually starting a new research project, and it's all about skeletal trauma. And I've destroyed my body from skateboarding and just being an idiot and a daredevil my whole life.
Yeah.
They're like, you've incurred so much damage. We want to study your skeleton further as part of our trauma research thing. So I got to sign on to a little extra bonus thing.
Holy shit.
But it's cool. What they do is they'll study my decomposition, and then literally my skeleton will actually go into their research museum. So
you'll be in a glass case?
Essentially, yeah.
Oh my God.
Now it's wild because they talk about the Body Farm.
Can you opt in to have your name being used?
I don't know. I think they anonymize it. But I told my wife, you can come visit me there.
This is the body of
somehow.
Kevin Drobish.
But it's wild. The one thing is they mention this as in a pop culture moment that everybody knows about. They just don't know what it means, okay? In The Blind Side, that movie about the football player,
yeah.
okay? Miss Liz was his tutor, and she was trying to make him not go to the University of Tennessee. I think was she from Auburn? I can't remember what school she went to, but she was trying to get him to go to her alma mater.
Yeah.
And she said, you don't want to go to Tennessee. You don't want to go to the University of Tennessee. They hide the bodies under the stadium, is what she told him. If you remember that from that movie.
I think I do now that you say that.
Way back in the 70s when this first started, underneath the stadium was like dead storage. That's where they ended up giving the body farm the museum and storage capacity. So
holy shit.
That's what's underneath the stadium there are the bodies, the skeletons and things like that from the research projects.
Wow.
So that's what that movie reference was to. So I
that's
tell people,
awesome.
Most people have heard of the body farm one way or the other. They just don't know about it. So
yeah. My goodness.
So that's where I'm going. Yeah.
Let me ask you this now. So, I mean, some people have, are you a spiritual person, would you say?
Yeah. I mean, it's weird. I was raised Catholic and with Catholic school, so I was like inundated with that kind of stuff. I made my own determinations as I got older. But yeah, I mean, it's funny. Like, I think doing what I do, you have to believe in the soul to some extent. No, whatever that means. But there's a quintessential life force that people have that makes them who they are. And that's where I think about it. That's what I think is a spirit. You know what I mean? Is like something and even after people die, not that I necessarily believe in ghosts, but I think about my dad's.
You don't believe in ghosts?
Not necessarily. I've never experienced it firsthand, but I think about my dad's spirit is with me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I think about the people that were close to me. Like, so I think about that. Like my dad is with me. Like, so it's.
What about the people who are the unclaimed people?
You know what? See, that's the weird thing. I think about some of the horrible, terrible deaths I've been around.
Yeah.
And I've never experienced anything where I felt something.
Some presence or anything.
Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, and I think about even like haunted places. You know what I mean? Because one of my favorite places to run around in when I was a high schooler was Dixmont State Hospital. Okay. Yeah. So I don't know if you heard about that or not. Okay. Because it hasn't existed technically in a true sense for decades. Okay. Right down where 79 and 65 intersect. Okay. So you got Neville Island in the middle there. Okay. And you've got what's considered to be, I think, the edge of Sewickley Heights, and then Avalon. Okay. Okay. Or Emsworth. Emsworth goes into Avalon. And right down there by that intersection of where the Neville Island Bridge comes off, okay? If you're going into Pittsburgh from the Neville Island Bridge, there's a whole giant area that's been like landscaped tremendously, like almost like they were doing strip mining or something like that, okay? Yeah. All these leveled off, and it's all fenced in. They were supposed to build a Walmart there, okay? And this was proposed like 15, 16 years ago when they determined that the land was unstable, like it was going to landslide, so they've never done anything with it. That is the property that Dixmont State Hospital used to be on, okay? It was a state mental institution, and it was named after Dorothy Dixon, who was like one of the pioneers in mental health. And there was a couple Dixmonts, I think, around the country, but this one was the local kind of sanitarium mental institution, okay? And we all have our ideas of what those are from TV and movies and things like that, okay? And I was picturing One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, because that's literally what as a kid, what you picture as these asylums, okay? And as a kid, it had already been, when I was in high school, it had been shut down for like a decade at least. It shut down sometime in the 80s, I think, or 70s. So the remnants of the hospital and all its buildings were still there. And of course, being a skateboarder and just somebody who likes to
hooligan,
get into crap, dig around in abandoned buildings, our friends and I would go down there all the time. And we befriended some kids that were skaters there, and we'd meet them. But our big goal was to skate the reservoir. There was a huge reservoir up on top of that hill. I think it's still there. Yeah. And we couldn't even get into it. It was so big. But we used to trounce around inside the old buildings in there, and there used to be like a morgue with an autopsy table.
And you've never felt any sort of weird things in there?
Nah. And it's weird. And even the cemetery. We used to hang out in
cemeteries. But you're open to it. Kids. You're not a skeptic, really.
It's weird. I'm one of the most cynical people you'll ever meet. And it's because I'm a scientist. Yeah. And that's one thing I've realized over the years is science ruins everything.
That's why I originally asked you the question. Is like you've done. I think you told me you did over 1,000 autopsies. So I mean, I feel like it kind of desensitizes. I mean, this is just my assumption. Is like you see this body, you see all this, and like there's so much of it, and does it does it have an effect on your outlook of what happens after life and everything like that?
I think it reinforces it. It's funny. I think about that. I was cynical before I got into this.
Yeah.
Luckily. But it's kind of funny. I think about that. Like I think it's reinforced kind of the way I look at the universe. I guess I look at like the Lutheran way of death is my view. Once you're dead, you're dead.
Yeah.
So do what you got to do here. Like literally, you know what I mean? It's so simplistic, but I haven't seen anything that's made me thought otherwise yet. So
yeah,
you know what I mean?
Last year I went to Moundsville Penitentiary.
Oh yeah.
I seen a ghost.
Okay.
I am not a skeptic. I accept it, but I have never in my life, and I've been to, we used to dick around at all these haunted places and go look and go try. Anytime we travel anywhere, I went to Salem on ghost tours, Mansfield Penitentiary on ghost tours where they filmed Shawshank, and I went to Moundsville. The whole time we're going through this tour, and I don't feel shit. You know what I mean? We're supposedly in like the real terror's cells, like the people that murdered hundreds of people, or not hundreds, but a lot of people. And I don't feel anything or anything like that at all. And then we're going to the infirmary. So the infirmary is on the top floor. Obviously, all the lights are out. This isn't like a haunted house. Like, we're not in the haunted house part yet, like the spook house part. This is just touring the prison at night. You walk up one set of steps, which are lit, and then you look to the left, and there's a whole room. It's like an empty cafeteria, it looks like. And then on the other side, you see another lit door because there's another set of steps down, and that's the only thing that has lights on it. So I walk in there, and we all have flashlights. We're allowed to use our phones, whatever. And I walk in there, still feel nothing the entire time. And I look over down the hallway, and I see a silhouette, clear as day, looked like a person wearing a ball cap, walk across the hallway. And the only reason I could see the silhouette is because of the door that was lit behind there. And I was startled, but I wasn't startled to the point because I didn't think it was a ghost. That's how vivid it was.
Oh, wow.
I was like, oh my God, that other tour scared the shit out of me. And that lady was like, the tour guide immediately turned around, looked, and was like, there's no other tours up here. So my face was struck. My wife looked at me and was like, she was creeped out because she saw the way I looked at it.
Right.
I always envisioned in my life, if I saw anything, I would, run away in terror.
Right.
My curiosity was raised through the roof, and I was like, because it looked so real. And we immediately walked over to where they walked across, where this room was, which was has the cells, like the mental, like a couple cells. They looked like the Chokey from Matilda.
Right.
And I looked all through the room. There was no way to get out of there. So that's the only reason that I feel like that I had to have seen a ghost. I still cannot explain it. I think about this before I go to bed, and there's no way that they planted someone there that was a worker that was hiding, because I had a fucking flashlight and I was diligently looking around, and there was no way. And I know that I seen it, and the whole rest of the night I was just like, kind of like dumbfounded that I wasn't scared. I was just more curious of it. But I don't know. It's interesting because, like, I feel like, if anyone, has experienced anything with 1,000 bodies, whether, you're alone in a room with them after you're doing work on there, like, you don't feel nothing, then it's hard.
Well, it's weird. And I think about that too. Like, when I was a kid, like, I used to get scared, like, horror movies, things like that. Like, and it's weird. Like, it's just nothing creeps me out or scares me now, because I think I've seen the harsh reality of death so much that I'm
absolutely
like, this is as real as it gets.
Yeah.
And it kind of sucks. It does. It kind of ruins things for you sometimes. And I think about that. Like, I almost get defensive sometimes. I get, like, when people question science.
Yeah.
Like, I kind of jump up a little because I'm like, this is what I do. But at the same time, I'm like, hey, like, I'm open, like, to whatever. Like, that's the one thing. Like, I'll never, be, closed-minded about things. But I remember going to Dixmont and thinking, man, like, I hope I see one. Like,
yeah, it's like,
because you think about that. This is supposed to be this place of tortured souls. Oh, I found out the reality of that place. One of my psychology instructors during my undergrad ended up being a clinical psychiatrist at Dixmont.
Really?
in the 70s when it was open and was still running. Okay. So he literally got out of school right in the era of Cuckoo's Nest. Okay,
Oh, wow.
to where that old mentality of the asylum where you just lock people up, straitjacket,
Yeah.
electroshock, lobotomy was going the way of the dodo, and talk therapy was coming in. Wow, what a wild concept. Let's talk to these patients and see what they feel.
Yeah.
So he was telling us that when he got out of school, that was his first job. They were like, all right, here you go, kid. And his
Jesus.
instruction was, do whatever you want, like essentially. Like, go in and just talk to him. And he said it was so wild. You have this conception of there's this locked building way up on the hill with all these fences and gates around it. There wasn't any of that. It was like an open campus. There weren't people like strapped to walls and things like that. He said literally the more lucid patients walked into town, into Emsworth, and were locals at their local bar that's still there. The Emsworth Inn is still there.
Wow.
And they would just, it was, he said that people were medicated. They did talk therapy and all that. And it wasn't this, people strapped to walls and killing themselves and things like that. So it was really interesting to hear that, the reality of that, because when you're a kid and you're trouncing around in these old rundown buildings.
Yeah, you visualize, you build it up in your mind.
You do, and it goes back to the fictionalization of it that you see in movies over the years.
Yeah.
If there's a horror movie, there's a funeral home, a morgue, an asylum, like somewhere involved in that, and it's always rundown and creepy. But yeah, it's funny. I remember up until a couple years ago, our students used to always go out to Dixmont when they'd find, if they were from out of town, they'd find out about it and go out there and visit it. And I remember, in fact, there's a series of books that are written around here about like local landmarks and the neighborhood books. Have you ever seen those?
Yeah.
Where they do the history. There's one about Dixmont actually that's
Wow.
really cool. And they talk about it, of course, now where everything, there's very few remnants of any buildings left. But it got to a point years ago where the hospital infirmary section got flooded, like, because it was in the basement, and that's where the morgue and the autopsy tape, they were still there. You could still go into them.
Yeah.
But it got to a point where you had to swim in there to get to this room. People were still doing that. It was dangerous. Like,
Jesus.
but yeah, that's how much of a draw that place was, as being one of those kind of haunted places that never really was.
Yeah, the creepy places, like you ever hear of Green Man's Tunnel?
Oh yeah. Yeah,
all that stuff.
Absolutely.
It's
like the local kind of like mythical legends and things like that.
It's like playing telephone over the years.
Yeah.
The story changes and
Exactly.
manifests itself.
Exactly. And Dixmont was one of those ones. And the funny thing is now, since they kind of raised all that stuff to build that Walmart there's a lot of open space that's unusable. They do zombies in the corn kind of thing, where you get on the back of the truck with paintballs and they have people
Really?
as zombies.
My goodness.
I don't know if they're doing that this year. It was put on hold because of COVID and all that. But that was something they had up there for years, because it's just kind of like a dead space. And then I think they have like a baseball training facility up there or something for kids or whatever. But it's just, it's one of those old things that used to be an attraction that the only thing left now is the cemetery from the actual asylum is still there.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I'm curious to know how, PIMS adapted towards the whole COVID pandemic. People obviously got thrown through a loop. I'm curious to know, as far as like, in the beginning when this was all going on, obviously the campus, was it closed down completely?
Oh man, it was wild. We had to go by what the Allegheny County Health Department was doing. That's like what our leader was doing.
So you were doing like 25%.
Well, we ended up, when the lockdown happened, I remember this was so intense because I was traveling for work right around the time that COVID kicked in.
Yeah.
And we used to do college fairs for recruitment. And there's national college fairs. Every major city has one.
Yeah.
And then small secondary ones will do them as well. And we would do like Maryland, New York, Ohio, Philly, Pittsburgh. We would travel and do a bunch of these. We would go up to Buffalo, Syracuse. So that's how we, recruited students from outside of the area. So we would do these and travel around. Well, I was doing my little tour circuit when COVID kicked. And I remember I did Pittsburgh and Cleveland. I was supposed to go to Syracuse the day the lockdown happened. I was supposed to be going up there, and I remember Syracuse was a hot spot that day too. Like that was one of the, like a super spreader spot. So of course my travel got canceled. And I remember I was having a beer when the announcement came in, actually, at Lincoln Avenue Brewing. I remember there was a few of us sitting there, and I heard the owner. He got a phone call, and it was literally someone telling him they just mandated everything's getting shut down tonight. And we were all sitting there thinking, wow, this will be the last beer we're going to have for a little while. We're like, oh, this will be 2 or 3 weeks. We had that conversation amongst ourselves. And lo and behold, how much later. Well, so literally that next day we were like, okay, so we're not doing any more college fairs. We're canceling all travel. And then when the mandate came down for the shutdown, the school, students were out. We could not have students on campus at all. So we had to do this unbelievable shift from in-person instruction to a quasi-online version. Okay.
Yeah.
We have an online program. We actually have had one for 20 years. We were the very first mortuary school to have an online program. So that's pretty well established. But that is not what we do on campus.
Yeah.
Okay. Fundamentally different types of instruction.
Can I interrupt you? So your online programming, like, are you teaching at the campus and broadcasting it online, or is it a different place?
Okay, so online, it is on an online educational platform. Okay?
Yeah.
And basically, the classes are set up and structured to where it opens on Sunday. Students can come in anytime from Sunday to Sunday and get their work done. Okay. That's called asynchronous education. It's where, you are not logging into a class time from like 7 to 9 on Wednesday.
You just have duties to fulfill.
Exactly. The only time that you would have a deadline or something that is structured would be maybe a quiz or an exam where it's only open for a 24-hour window.
Yeah.
Okay. So whereas synchronous education is you have anatomy class from 7 to 10 Monday.
Yeah.
You have psychology, you know what I mean? Scheduled block scheduling, things like that.
Absolutely.
Where you show up for a scheduled class to an instructor. Okay. So when we had to not have people in person, we had to switch over to our online platform, but make it a synchronous event. So we had to schedule a class block and say, okay, you're going to have anatomy, just like you would if you were on campus from 7 to 10 on Monday and 1 to 3 on Thursday or something like that. So that's what we had to do, was then come up with video lectures that we could record and give to the students.
So it wasn't live.
Well, we ended up doing Zoom.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we did Zoom classes, which, oh boy, let me tell you
it sucks.
What an adjustment that was for me, because part of what I enjoy about the classroom is the dynamics between myself and the students. I got that when I was a musician. Like, if you're not interacting with the crowd, it's kind of boring. You know what I mean? So, and the problem was when we first started doing the Zoom, of course, everything was the Wild West. We didn't know how to use this stuff that well. And also, we didn't know how to class manage yet, okay? Because, if you're not requiring your student to actually turn their camera on and turn their microphone on as part of your, structure of the class, I was looking at 20 blank screens.
And you don't know if anyone's there or not.
They checked in at the beginning of the class. I don't know if they're there. So you lose that, interaction. You use the question and answer, and it's kind of like the core of what a classroom really is.
Yeah, it's a shame what it is.
So it became difficult to really connect with the students in the way that you normally would. And I feel bad for students that enrolled right when that happened.
Yeah.
Like we did. We had students that were brand new when that kicked in. And on the opposite side of that it was the students that were finishing at the same time because they didn't get what they should have. So it was tough, but I got to tell you, man, our program director, Dr. Barry Lease, championed. I don't think he slept probably the whole time. He
made it work.
And he made it happen. And especially with our dean of students, Mike Burns, they worked together so diligently with our faculty to get this put together, and even the rest of our administrative team, because we're a small, tight little team. There's 8 people that run the whole school.
Yeah.
And everyone just was, front and center. But the big wigs at the school made it happen in a very short period of time. And let's just say that other schools did not step up like we did. Because we really keep our ear kind of on social media and our eye on social media. to see what other mortuary students are saying about us, other schools, things like that. So we really kind of keep our finger on that pulse. And it was wild to see what other students were saying about, because people are vocal now on social media.
You could always find a bad word.
Good reviews, bad reviews, everything right, and everything in between. So we were really watching, and apparently other schools just didn't do as much as we did, which was good to hear that, we kind of did step it up. But it was very difficult.
How the hell do you implement, labs and everything? Like,
that's what got put on hold.
How do you get a dead person to someone's living room so they could practice? That's
what got put on hold, and that was the most difficult part for us. Was because I mentioned we handle 500 decedents a year in our lab, sometimes more.
Yeah.
And here was a great parallel. Okay, so between Pittsburgh and New York City, very large, and small, but. Yeah. New York City has a mortuary school there, okay, and they don't do the type of embalmings that we do, okay, for the medical examiner, things like that.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, when New York City got those surges, there were so many people, they got overwhelmed, they were putting them into mass graves, okay. So at our school, even though students weren't there, people were still coming, and all of a sudden, every time a surge would hit, we'd get 4 to 5 people a day.
Yeah, bodies that needed taken care of.
A lot more.
How long does a body take to embalm?
If an instructor that's a seasoned embalmer, you're looking an hour and a half to 2 hours.
Oh, so
on
still
average,
so
on average.
But someone who is a professional who is you could do it with your eyes closed. Probably 2 hours is the absolute shortest.
I would say probably on average, and you never know. There's differences,
but still you're getting 4 or 5, maybe 6 bodies a day. That's 10 hours of work that needs to be done.
Right. And
every day.
So the instructors were just handling the cases by ourselves.
Yeah.
We literally we'd be over there because we weren't in the classroom, right? So we would do, when we weren't teaching, we would just be over there taking care of these cases. And it's a good thing because I'm not saying this would have happened, but what if we weren't embalming all those cases and that morgue got overwhelmed? What were they going to do? Some cities were bringing in mobile morgues, like mobile refrigeration units and all that. But you get to a point where it's overload. You know what I mean?
Like you don't really have other options. Now, so I was real curious about this because I remember New York and like the whole mass graves thing, but it's like, wouldn't it be a more simple, maybe you can't do it, but wouldn't it be a more simple solution to cremate everyone?
Well, you could, but here's the problem. All the people that were, and we saw this because we know funeral directors from New York City and all the surrounding areas, all over New York. And they were telling us there was such an overwhelming demand for cremation because cremation's been on the rise for years. Okay, cremation rates are upwards of 50 to 75% of some places around the country, even more out west.
My wife thinks I'm insane that I want to be cremated.
Well, and we tell people that's a personal choice. It's just a form of disposition. You know what I mean? You can still do the embalming and viewing and all.
Well, whenever we were talking about before, whenever you were going to donate your body to science, I was going to get to the fact that the whole like, what's your wife think about it? Like, is she someone who is thinking of a traditional type of afterlife? Or
I told her that I'll be dead, so I don't care. She can do whatever she wants. I told her, if you want to have embalming, viewing, awesome, because I'm an organ donor, so that's going to happen.
Yeah.
And then I always guess that I'm probably going to need an autopsy, because I don't know, I've escaped so many violent death scenarios, like with car accidents and things like that I'll probably need an autopsy. But I told her, I said, you make the determination of what you want. I don't care. Really, I don't. Whatever you want, it's for you. I'll be gone.
Yeah.
But I said, it's up to you. And it's funny because she already has her burial plot. Like she's going to be cremated, actually.
Yeah.
And she has what's called a cremation stone. It's a big, giant piece of like marble that has like little tubes drilled into it.
Oh, nice.
And you can put little.
I didn't know that was a thing.
Cremation urns. Yeah, it's really cool. So her parents have one. Her dad died years ago. But her parents have one at a cemetery up in State College, and our rock is right next.
So it's like a headstone. You could have a headstone and be cremated.
And then basically you put like a little nameplate, and you can put a little customization if you're a mason or whatever. You know what I mean on top of it. So my little tube will be empty, because I won't be there. But that's where you can put our cats in there or something like that. But yeah, like it's kind of funny. So I told her, whatever you want to do, you do. And I said, and I even asked her, like, what are your wishes, And so it's kind of funny to think about that. Like, it depends on who goes first as to what you're going to do.
Yeah.
But no, she's fine with it.
It's weird because it's like, I'm 30, hopefully I'm going to be here for a while, but it's like me and my wife, we have that conversation. It's like, I feel like it's, it's a morbid thing to talk about it, but realistically, something crazy could happen to me tomorrow. Something crazy could happen to her. I want to know what her wishes are, and I want her to know what mine are. And it's wild to have them conversations. But it's like realistic.
And one thing you should always think about too is not only have the conversation with her. Imagine if you both go at the same time.
Oh, yeah.
Find a third party that will carry out your wishes.
Yeah, because I know that if her mother is going to do what she wants, supposedly. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Well, that's the thing is, and people make these wild, funeral requests. And I said, we'll do whatever you want. It might be a private viewing. Okay.
Yeah.
Because people say, what's the wildest thing you've ever had?
Yeah, I would love to know.
Well, okay. So one of the weirdest requests that I ever had was this woman was in her 70s, I think. And she was very well endowed in her chest, and she wanted cleavage shown at her funeral. I'm not kidding you. I don't have to make this up. She asked that it be shown, okay? So standard embalming procedures for us involve at least one incision, okay?
Yeah.
Right at if you put your finger on your clavicle, okay,
yeah,
push in, you can feel your pulse right there.
Yeah.
Okay? That's where we get the carotid artery in the jugular vein for our standard embalming procedure. Wow. Okay, that's a neckline, right?
Yeah, that's where they teach people to stab people in the military.
Yeah, exactly. You get an open shirt, okay, of any capacity, let alone enough to show cleavage where you're down, you know what I mean, in the middle
You're
of the
chest. You're going to see that incision.
Oh, my Lord. So you have to be very careful. Now, granted, there's sutures you can use that are like plastic surgery that we learned that you can hide them. But we had to totally hide that and cosmetize because we laid her out with cleavage. And a weird thing you don't think about is gravity when you're dressing people, and because how many people put a woman's bra back on? People used to taking them off, right? But you have to position things correctly. It's wild. But that is one of the strangest ones I ever got. Luckily, the person that made their arrangements made that very clear that was part of the service and that was her request.
Wow.
So then what you have to think about is, now, of course, I didn't own the funeral home. I mean, my boss acquiesced to this, but that's the kind of thing where the more bizarre the request gets, the more you have to think about, who am I going to let in the door to see this?
Yeah.
So you might have a family private viewing for that component, and then whoop, slide things up. But there are some wild things that are being done in funeral service to where it's the kind of things we always said it would never happen.
Huh.
And it's happened. Open eyes at a viewing.
You've had that?
I haven't, but it's happened in Puerto Rico.
Jesus.
Yeah.
I saw things on whether it's fake or not, Facebook, where they had someone passed away and they positioned them at a card table.
Oh no, that's real.
And
that's real.
I assumed it would be. It's pretty crazy.
Standing up. There's guys, they put them in the corner, standing up.
Yeah.
That's another thing in Puerto Rico that's real popular.
I feel like that's weird as hell. Some weekend at Bernie's. I feel like I would want so I was just Googling some stuff last night, and I can't remember what year they said, but they used to put a string, through a tube after they bury someone, and they could pull the string if they become alive again. I almost want, if I was to have a traditional burial, I would want a viewing, a sight glass.
Okay.
I would want to be able to, I don't know why, but I feel like that would be creepy. I would like it though.
Those are available. And it's funny because that was a trend in the Victorian era. I actually wrote a research paper about that in school about, I'm trying to think, it was something we had to write in we have a history class called Thanatology. It's about the history of death.
Wow.
One of the most amazing classes I ever took. So I'm a history nerd, but it tells you all about myths about deaths, the history of how we do things, what society's tied to it.
Yeah.
And it's so funny to think about that sometimes, some of the things that we think of that are so silly, but they have such deep meaning down the road.
Yeah, meaning.
And that's one thing that we tell our students is you have to tie meaning into what we do.
Yeah, one thing that might not mean anything to you is going to mean everything in the world to the other person.
Exactly. So it's sometimes it's those little things. You know what I mean?
That's wild.
But the history component of it is something that I think some people are they don't seem to be interested in it, and I'm like, wow, there's so much cool stuff tied to. And you don't even think about it sometimes, but it's things that are part of our everyday life. Like when you learn about the Egyptians, they were the people that invented autopsies and
I
embalming.
was literally just thinking about like the Egyptian type, like that was like the origination of it, right?
It's funny because they invented autopsies and embalming, but it wasn't a scientific thing. It was a religious cultural process. And one of the myths that came out of that, I love that. One of the myths I can always dispel is, okay, when you talk about how they mummified people, one of the long mysteries was, how did they get the brain out? Okay. Because the brain is the first thing that decomposes in the body. I mean, it turns to like goo. Okay.
So How quick?
Within like a day or two, it'll start to like really break down.
Wow.
Like if you're not like refrigerated, things like that.
So in embalming, do you take the brain? You take the brain out of someone?
We don't. We just embalm it.
Oh, okay.
Like, we just embalm it.
Suck all the moisture out of it.
Exactly.
Okay.
But the Egyptians, their thing was all about like, and it took like 30 days to do this embalming procedure. Okay. So they would kind of do like an autopsy, which was more like evisceration to start the process, but they never cut into the head. And they were like, how do they get the brain out? And
I feel like I've heard lore about a hook through a nose.
Yeah, there was the hook, like the long hook.
Yeah.
And they were like, they'd put it up to their nose and pull it out. And I'm like, okay, trust me, if you've been around enough brains like I have, you're not pulling any brain out.
Yeah.
Like it would just go right through it. So they figured out eventually, it was within the past, like, I think the past couple of years, they actually kind of figured out that they used it to like actually like get in there and break it all up.
Yeah, make it be gooey.
Lean them head down and drain it out of their nose and mouth, which is horrifying sounding.
Wow.
But that's one of those things where when you are around enough human anatomy and things like that, you're like, there's no way this is coming out solid. Yeah, you know what I mean? It's just funny, the mythology that gets connected to things sometimes becomes so ingrained in our culture. And I think about that because I own like a copy of the Egyptian Book of the Dead where it describes all these things. And they don't ever say it in black and white terms, how they did all that processes. It's kind of secret, but it's funny after a while, you're like, okay, that makes sense. Like, yeah, they weren't pulling anything out of there.
Wow.
But yeah, that's funny. I think about that. So they invented mummification. They invented, autopsies and things, and talking about, some of the weirdest things, kind of creepy things I've seen in my line of work, was people that are mummified, like through natural processes.
What do you mean? What is considered to be mummified?
Okay, so mummification is either through natural or man-made processes where the skin and all of the organs are dehydrated enough to where they're preserved. Okay, like all the moisture gets sucked out very quickly.
Where there's no breakdown.
And there's no anaerobic, like breakdown, like all the oxygen and kind of all the water, everything gets taken out. So it just becomes almost like jerky, like dried tissue.
Yeah.
Okay. And you have to have the perfect kind of storm for this to happen. The Egyptians figured out that the salt that was in the bed of the Nile River, it's called natron salt, had this amazing phenolic component to it where it sucked moisture out of stuff. You could just bury somebody in the sand there and they would like mummify in like a month without even any other processes.
Jeez.
So that's what they use. So that's what they ended up using was natron salt. That's where the Egyptian mummification process comes from. But with the right environmental conditions, a body can mummify relatively quickly. Okay, so I saw 2 different cases within about 2 years in the pathology lab where unattended death, and they had no relatives or anything like that to check on them. Okay, and this is weird when you get to that point where you're like, where did all your people go? You know what I mean? Like, where did your people go? How do you have nobody? So this person was laying on their living room floor for 9 months. Okay.
9 months.
9 months, just laying there on their back, okay, supine position. And it just so happened that heat was on and there was an air current moving in the room continually to where it circled around them. And that was enough. And no one came to shut anything off. And it just
ran for 9 months.
And then during the summer and things like that, there was the natural heat and all that. This person sat there for 9 months and just slowly mummified, okay, from this perfect condition going on. The neighbors, okay, now you're thinking, how do the neighbors not know this? This isn't a residential, it'd be like in your neighborhood if you're next door neighbor, okay? The lawn isn't mowed for a while, right? Okay.
Yeah.
They go over and start mowing the lawn. The papers and the news and the mail starts piling up on the news on the front. They just come and pick it up. All they had to do was look in the window. the curtains weren't even closed, they would have seen her laying right on the floor.
Oh my God.
She sat there for 9 months.
That is crazy.
So someone finally, whatever, I don't even remember how who discovered her, but they finally found her and they bring her to the lab. This was like a little old woman to begin with. And it was wild. It was almost as if she was a skeleton. I was just able to pick her up with she weighed whatever skeleton and dried skin was. It was amazing to see from a scientific standpoint and like frightening because it did not look like a human being. You know what I mean? It did not look like a person because all the muscle was gone. It was just literally the skeleton with a very thin layer of...
Is bone very dense? Like, is it very heavy?
It is, but it's also, bones are essentially hollow and porous.
Yeah, I
you know
guess.
what I mean?
Like a honeycomb infrastructure almost.
But there wasn't much left of anything. And it was difficult to even determine the cause of death, you know what I mean? Because everything was just so gone. It was so shriveled.
Wow.
So within a year, we had another case where the person was only there for 3 months. Same kind of conditions.
Wow.
This one was amazing because they had a lot of tattoos on them.
Yeah.
And I'm always amazed at how tattoos look from the outside in.
Yeah.
And things like that. And how they will actually stay around after you. If your skin falls off, your tattoos will still be there. It's wild. But to see what the tattoos look like.
What? So what?
It goes into the dermal layers, not just the epidermal layers, but so if your skin slides off, your tattoo will still be in your skin underneath.
Jesus.
Yeah, it's wild because I've seen like every stage of that before. It's amazing. And the photographs I've taken of those stages is just something I love showing in my slideshows. I have to be careful because of tattoos can tell who people are sometimes. But I love it when it's like something very generic, like a sports like logo or something like that. I can show how it looks like when after your skin. But the tattoos on this woman were amazing.
Do you got a Steelers logo tattoo in your slideshow?
Somewhere, yeah. With actually like Asian writing that I know what it says on it and things like that. Oh, but yeah, that's the thing is I think about the slideshows that I have collected. And some of them, like I said, they were used for evidence and things like that. Some of them, it's just, but some of them, it's so readily identifiable who the person is because of the tattoo that I can't show people.
Yeah.
But those processes, seeing what the body can do through just the right conditions has just always been astounding to me. Like that was one, the mummification thing. I never thought I would ever see that.
Yeah, that's super wild to think about that. All natural.
Yeah.
Huh.
And it's wild that, that you could achieve that. Cause there's actually, I think a company now that offers traditional mummification processes. Like you can get done as a form of disposition.
I emailed some guy who did pet freeze drying, all that, just because I was like, I'd love to talk to a pet taxidermist, like that would be a wild job. And, I don't know anything about it. So, never got an email back, surprise. But, maybe I'm going to keep trying, but that's such like an interesting thing because, are you familiar with, what the hell is it called? Trundle Manor?
Yes, actually I met those guys. They came to an event at our school. I know you did an interview with them recently.
Interesting bunch.
Mr. Arm. It's funny. We did an event at the school. It was an open house. It was right before COVID hit. It had to be. It had to be that fall, I'm guessing. We had an open house at the school. And we always try to bring a fun component into what we do. You know what I mean? Something that's just, try to, dispel a little bit what we do as being scary or whatever. But we actually had them come with their mobile display. They have like, it's almost like a food truck kind of thing.
That's where I interviewed them, in that truck.
There you go. You know what I'm talking about. So yeah, they came to the school and set up in our parking lot. And I know there was one time one of our classes did a field trip there actually.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, honestly, they have fascinating things in there.
Yeah.
And the reason that I even brought it up is because their house cat is the reason I saw. That's the first time I ever seen one of the freeze dried pets in real life, and I'm just like, Jesus, like it's intense because my mother, she always joked about it. She was like, oh, whenever Buddy goes, I'm going to just have him laying nice in there. I'm like, you are not doing that to the dog. You're going to let him get dusty, and that ain't never happening. But yeah, I don't know. It's wild to think about. I want to definitely learn more about it.
Well, and it's wild because I think about, there's been people that have requested themselves to be taxidermied, which no one will do. Like that's been a weird, and I think it was a joke was it on Jackass?
Oh yeah,
I think it was Jackass.
They brought the old woman and they were like, we want her to be
and I think about that
sitting up. They said they wanted her sitting up so the kids could.
Well, and I think about that. I would not be surprised if we're like not that far off. I mean,
from people doing that,
someone's just got to do it. You know what I mean? Like
then you're just going to be you're going to turn into an item that will be thrown away eventually.
Well, see, and that's what I think about is it's going to be the new version of the cremated remains in an urn sitting on the mantle. Okay. And that's a Pittsburgh thing. Like, I swear, like
what, an urn on a mantle?
Because what's going to happen when that person dies? Who's going to take that person in the urn?
I think about that.
Take care of them, and it's a big thing around here where people come back, and like you tend to serve the same families over and over again at a funeral home.
Yeah,
you know what I mean, and you'll see someone come back 5 years later, and okay, well, Dad died 5 years ago. We had him cremated, and now Mom died, and she still had Dad sitting on the shelf. And we don't know what to do with them. You know what I mean? So then you start having the conversation. Well, then you start having the conversation. Okay, well, would you like to have them buried with other family members? Do you want to have a scattering service somewhere? And please don't do it on Heinz Field.
I just saw that.
End zone. We got called. The school got called by the media about that. I don't think anybody at the school talked to anybody about it. But one of my friends, actually, Leanne Sherman Hudak, runs a funeral home right over on the north side at Brady, and she actually was quoted. I think I don't know if it was in the Trib or who it was, but she actually talked to them about it. And
unreal. Kind
of talked a little bit about it's illegal. You have to have permits.
Do you though?
Scattering cremated remains is actually okay. It's one of those
biohazard or whatever.
It is, and that's exactly what they talked about at the stadium. Was they brought in a hazmat team and removed it as hazardous material. Okay,
wow.
Because it technically is. It's a weird thing. Okay, hair from a barber shop on the floor is considered a biohazard. They have to use biohazard remediation to technically get rid of that. Okay.
Wonder how many people do that.
Exactly. Right? The biohazard remediation event in the dumpster, right? In the alley.
Giant Eagle bag.
Right. The hard to recycle event in the hillside, right? But that's the crazy thing is you don't think about
I never thought about that.
And there are places that actually have designation as scattering gardens, okay? And usually it's at a cemetery, it's somewhere. But, oh, man, I'm not going to tell you how many people go up on top of Mount Washington and at the Overlook. And I mean, seriously, my dad's wish was he wanted to be scattered at Lake Worth down in Florida and at his fishing spots on the Ohio River.
Hell yeah.
That's illegal as hell. You know what I mean? But the funny thing is, okay, first of all, who's driving around regulating cremated ash spreadings, okay? But that one showed that it's something that is very commonplace. There was probably somebody doing that on the other end of the field that no one saw.
Yeah.
Like people do that there all the time.
Absolutely. You know what I mean? I'm sure that happens.
Anywhere there's an eye.
That's just the first time someone's seen it.
Exactly. Or reported. It's because people got hit with it is what it was.
Oh my God.
I read different accounts of the story because I was like, why did somebody...
I would feel some type of way if someone threw their...
Well, that's what it was. We're like, why did somebody report this? Like, somebody had to be offended by this somehow. And I'm like, how would a Steeler fan be offended by another Steeler fan doing that? Someone got it dumped on him. And that's what it was.
Oh,
Gust
my
of wind
God.
blew. So they did it very poorly.
Yeah.
But it's talked about because it's something that when you're a funeral director, you get that question all the time. So we were going to, take Dad up to so-and-so park and have a little, and we're like, you didn't hear it from me, wink, wink, wink. You know what I mean? Kind of thing. So like, you do what you want. You're on your own. I'm advising you it's illegal, but people.
What are the consequences?
We'll find out, right?
Yeah.
I've never heard of anybody being prosecuted for it or charges being brought up. So we'll see what happens. I can't wait to see what the actual charge is.
Yeah. It's probably something wild.
Like what would the charge actually be in a criminal capacity?
Hopefully they're not hopefully they're not made an example of.
And I think that's almost where it's going to be because
they want to nip it in the bud.
Because it's something that's always been done.
Yeah.
And I think, that's what they're going to do is they're going to be like, look, we're going to crack down on this.
I would have never expected, I didn't even think about that being a part of it, a biohazard material.
Yeah.
You're just like, it's ashes.
And the thing is, I think about that. And that's one thing that Leanne kind of mentioned in it was, nothing's going to happen to you. You're not going to get sick unless you inhaled them. But all it is mineral components. You know what I mean? There's no disease process left after the cremation process. I don't even know if CJD could survive that. So But that's one of those things where it's unnerving to think about another
100%.
Being
Just the idea
in
of
you,
it.
on you, or something.
If you were at a
like
campsite and you got hit with a shovel full of ashes, you wouldn't care about it. But
Right.
if it's a person, you're like,
Jim
it's
or
kind of
something,
weird.
or
Yeah.
Mom.
Yeah.
But so that's the thing is, and I think also some people look at it as it's just kind of disrespectful to do that in a public place where other people are. You know what
That's
I mean?
Randy from Dinette Jack's. Like, that's all he wanted.
But that's so funny because that's a total Pittsburgh thing.
Yeah, for sure.
I want to be spread at Heinz Field. What ultimate Steelers fan wouldn't want that? So,
Yeah.
But it's kind of funny that is something that has never happened before, and we'll see what happens.
I want to be cremated and given away in keychains.
Okay,
Like little things like that.
That's easy. One of the newest things, in fact, this is something that I got involved in, and it happened right before COVID hit. So I don't really know how much commercial success it's gotten, but
Glass blowing.
yeah, I met a guy that was a glass blower.
Yeah.
And he made me some cremation marbles and jewelry out of my dad and my cats.
Wow.
And cremated remains create this very unique white color in blown glass that nothing else does. So, and he can mix like 2 or 3 or 4 colors into it, but it
That's
was
pretty
wild.
wild.
Yeah, he made some stuff with that, and he started marketing with some local funeral homes, and then COVID hit, so I'm like, I'm not sure what happened with it, but that's something.
I see people do jewelry
it's
too.
very cool. It's very
People get
interesting.
them put in like, gold and diamonds and shit like that.
Well, you can be made into a diamond, a synthetic diamond. Coral reef is another one. Like if you're an ocean person,
Really?
they put you in a whole bunch of people and they make chunks of reefs and drop them and stuff like that.
I read an article that said that eventually you're going to be able to be blasted off into space.
That's already happened. It's already happened.
Did it?
Yeah. Who was it? The guy that created Star Trek. Oh man, what was his name?
Created Star Trek.
The guy that was the original
I don't know
writer
who
and
that
creator of
is.
Star Trek.
Were you a Trekkie?
Gene Roddenberry. A little bit. The original stuff.
Yeah.
A little more. But Gene Roddenberry actually got taken up into space and released. They do
Unreal.
it like once or twice a year, and there's like they do like 10 people at a time or something like that into a rocket.
That's crazy.
So that's the thing is there's all these new versions of the final disposition.
Yeah.
And it's now kind of something that's almost more functional or fun. You know what I mean? Because that urn on the shelf.
It's not it's kind of a grim representation of it.
Well, and it's like, did your dad is he really into that urn? Or you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like sometimes
Did he wanna-
sometimes it's just a generic, representation.
It would be cool to
Meanwhile,
get incorporated into paint and have an artist paint like a portrait of you or something.
that was just done at an art gallery in Lawrenceville, I think this week.
Really?
It was an art gallery. It was called like Bones, Teeth, and Ashes or something like that.
Jeez.
And it was
I'm going to have to look into that.
memorial art that was done. And it's funny because this harkens back to Victorian era stuff. Okay?
Yeah.
If you ever go to the Mutter Museum in Philadelphia, I highly recommend it. It's the Anatomical Surgeon Society of Philadelphia's historical museum. It's been there for like 150 years.
Wow.
And it makes my collection of bones and skeletons look like child's play. Like
Wow, I would love to
they
see
have
all that.
one of everything. And I'm actually have some specimens I need to donate to them that are so unique that like I shouldn't have in my office. But the Mutter Museum, this was 2 years ago when I was out there. They had a display. I don't know if it's permanent or not, but it's called Victorian hair art. Okay.
No way.
And this was something that when somebody would die, they would take their hair and make wreaths out of it. They would make
Holy
like
shit.
they look like
Never seen that before.
drawings and things like that, but they would make all these amazing sculptures out of the hair and memorialize the person. And they had a whole display of that on there a couple of years ago.
I'm sure you went to that. God, I'm sorry.
That's
for
something
interrupting.
that's making a comeback in that sense of how can we tie in artistic creation with the person.
That's insane. You know what was wild? I think it had to be after you and I spoke, but I went to that bodies exhibit down at the Science Center, and that was so wild to see. Definitely just like an interesting, I don't know, like growing up, I was never really like fascinated with death or anything like that. But honestly, even before I talked to Sarah or you, it's always just been something that I was always very fascinated with. Like after I would go to viewings and like see like, how are these people, how is this done? Anytime you see it in movies and everything. But, the older I get, I feel like the more fascinated I get with everything.
I think what it is too is the more you live, the more you kind of like experience life and death. You know what I mean? And you don't, when you're younger, unless you like experience a lot of death, you don't think about it. You don't think about your mortality.
You really don't at all. It just started happening to me within like the last like 3 or 4 years where I like really, start to think about like, what's the meaning of life? Like what happens? Like, my buddy, he has been getting real into like near death experiences, like just like researching them. And I've been like trying to find someone to like talk to about that because it's fascinating to me because I feel like, who knows what happens after it, but like I start to think about death more. And like some days it scares the shit out of me and I feel like I'm going to have a panic attack. And some days, I feel like that it's going to be something that, hopefully will be a peaceful way. But it's interesting to think about it more because, it really was like a switch flipped in like the past like 3 or 4 years because before I never even, thought of it, never even thought about the idea of like what would happen or anything. But now it's like, I see people passing away, people are getting older. Like, I'm not as young as I was and it's just so wild to see everything.
Well,
my brother has 2 kids and it's just like Jesus. I just remember us playing Nerf guns like yesterday.
I think about that. There's usually something that makes you, you can look back on it and there was the switch. Like there was the reason I started thinking about that. Yeah. And for me, it was weird. I determined that I was going to go to mortuary school after my grandfather died. That was kind of the impetus for me to make that change.
It was a
terrible funeral service.
Yeah.
But then literally 2 years before that, it was right after I got back from my wedding. Literally, we were back home like 7 or 8 days from our wedding. And I tore my ligaments in my leg.
Yeah, you told me that.
Blew my knee out and ended up having 5 reconstructive surgeries. And on surgery number 3, I got a staph infection. So here's my near-death experience. Okay, it's
oh
not
my
very
God,
exciting.
I forgot you told me that.
Not very exciting.
I know, but I forgot you told me that happened.
But literally, I get this staph infection and I get rushed into like emergency. It's scary when you meet with your surgeon and they ask you when's the last time you ate because they're going to rush you into surgery kind of thing. So I get down to my surgeon. They're like, you get over to Southside Hospital, we're going to have a surgical suite waiting for you by the time you get there kind of thing.
Yeah.
So that was really scary. I was like, oh my God. Like when you see the doctor and the nurse nervous, like you get scared.
You were at home when this happened.
I literally was showering and I remember, because I just had the surgery a couple of days prior and you had to be, I couldn't take a real shower. You had to be very careful not to get the bandages and the surgical site wet.
Yeah.
Which is difficult when it's in the middle of your leg and you can't bend it. So I remember I got out of the shower. This is early in the morning. My wife was at work and I got my bandage wet and I'm like, oh, I'm going to get in trouble. Shit, I better, oh crap, I got to clean this up. And I took the bandage off and I looked at my knee and it was really tight and shiny. And I was like, that doesn't look right. And I moved my knee and my surgical incision burst open and it started like hemorrhaging a little bit, like this really gross orange blood.
Yeah.
Like this color.
Pus and blood.
Like, oh yeah, it was infected blood. I knew exactly what it was. And I started to panic. I called my wife immediately and was like, you got to take me like to the hospital. Luckily she was able to get home and we get down to the south side to where the surgeon was. In fact, my surgeon that I had for my initial surgeries, Freddie Fu, just died like 2.5 weeks ago. He was that really prominent orthopedic surgeon.
Yeah, I did see that.
He was my surgeon when I first went down to UPMC, actually.
Jeez.
Yeah, it was a weird intersection with that happening. But I get rushed down to the UPMC, Southside Center, and they're like, you go to the hospital immediately. And I get over there, and I started feeling kind of a little weird before they even put me under for the surgery. But they do
like, what do you mean weird?
Like out of it. Like I was like, I started just like, it was weird. It was like fever, you know what I mean? Almost. Yeah. And so they do I remember I went under and I have issues with anesthesia and things like that. So when they start to put me under, I feel weird. And when I come out of it, I have a reaction every time, like adverse reactions every single time. And this time when I came out of it and came to, I was like in a fever state, like they had taken the graft out, but I had a body-wide septic infection.
Yeah.
And so they started, dose me with antibiotics. But for like about 2.5 days, I was like floating on the ceiling. Like I was out of my body. It was just weird. I can't describe it. I was just sitting there in that room. I would hear people talking. I would see just things kind of floating around the room. I couldn't explain any of it. I can't remember any of it, what it was. I was completely out of my mind. I tried to, and I don't even remember this, but at one point I was so like feverish that I literally started yanking all of like the tubes and things out of me because I was in the ICU unit.
Yeah.
I started like trying to leave. Like, and my leg was like non-functional. Like my leg was non-functional, but I was literally trying to rip all the equipment out of me and leave the hospital. They had to like sedate me and like, yeah. And it was really crazy because I don't remember anything specific about it. But the wild thing was like, I think about the crazy interactions we talked about in Pittsburgh, and tying it back to Lincoln Avenue Brewing once again. The owners there are named Grant and Lisa, husband and wife that run the place, and they're just awesome. They're like my second family. It was like literally probably the third time I was there. I was talking to the owners, and Grant and I made a connection because he's a big Deadhead, so we both love beer. So, you know, we started chatting right away, and I started talking to his wife, and we started talking about what we do, and then all of a sudden it was weird. We started having this conversation, and we realized that she was one of my critical care nurses when I was in the hospital that weekend I almost died.
Holy shit.
Yeah, she was a critical care nurse. That was her specialty. She was down at Southside at that time. And she remembered because I was the musician on the wing.
Jesus.
But it's coming up on the 16-year anniversary this Halloween.
Of your leg. That happened on Halloween.
I was in the hospital over Halloween. Yeah, it was the only year I ever missed Halloween.
Jesus.
But yeah, it's so wild. So like, it's just crazy that like I was drawn back down to that little brew pub place, and that's who I met there. So
my goodness.
Yeah, but that's one of those things where I like my story's not very exciting because I can't recall anything that was going on.
I know, but some people have wild. Are you a Reddit person?
I am. Unfortunately, I keep going down that rabbit hole all the time.
It's a pit. It's a pit. I'm really trying to delete my Facebook. The only thing that's keeping me on there is I'm parts of some dog groups. You know.
Oh yeah.
Like,
since you got your adoption.
Since I got the dog, and it's like I feel like I need to be on there just for those. But other than that, it's a fucking pit, and I hate it.
Well, you know what? I've really limited what I allow in on my Facebook. You know what I mean? And I think,
and you're right. I've been thinking about just deleting everyone and just keeping the group pages, but it's just like it offers me no joy. But Reddit is like the best and worst thing that has ever happened because it is the internet with, you know, real filters that you could cater towards.
Well, and I think about like every once in a while, I'll type something in Reddit and it comes up and I'm like, oh my God, it's the exact same thing I thought. Like,
yeah. And,
like,
and that's
and
what
some
it
of them
is.
Are just funny. Like some of them, I'm like, these people should be like stand-up comedians.
Well, anything you want, you know, it's literally anything you want. You know, I follow sneakers, hot peppers now, you know, I got a Traeger grill. So like, I'm
on you with that one. Yeah.
I'm in there and like, you know, you have so many good things that other people that are like, you know, you and I that have like good ideas. Everyone has good ideas. I have a good idea sometimes. So do you, you know, this is just a Rolodex of people that share those good ideas for that subject matter.
Yeah.
And like, it's fantastic, but they have a near-death experience tab and you're reading it and you're like, some of them are bullshit, you could tell.
Right.
Or maybe they're not, but they sound fabricated.
Right.
But some of them you're just like, there's no way that this could be, you know, made up. Like, no way. Like whenever I spoke to some of the people who had the alien experiences with one of the episodes that I did, this girl had an experience where she talked about how she was abducted, and I mean it was like so detailed and vivid. You know, if she made it up, which I don't think she did, there's no benefit to her making it up. If anything, people telling these stories, you know, the normal reaction is you're a lunatic, but you know, like what benefit is it for you to like make this up?
Exactly.
And the story was just so detailed and vivid that it's just, I don't know. It's fascinating though, for sure.
Well, I think about that too, growing up without internet, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It was the stories you would hear when you would meet people, like if you went to a concert somewhere else, or when you went off to college, you would hear those tales or stories or whatever. And
Hell yeah.
Like, is this real? Is this not?
Think about that.
Really
Think about you going to that psych ward. It's like one person tells a younger skateboarder, dude, like, I had this experience, and that
Exactly.
younger skateboarder was like, my older cousin told me this. It's real 100%. And you're just like, who the fuck knows? No one knows.
And then you said earlier, it's like the phone game or Purple Monkey dishwasher.
Yeah.
It keeps getting crazier the
Crazier
further
and
down
crazier.
it goes. And so, yeah, it's interesting. You take and leave, like, okay, what's truth or what's not.
100%.
And I think about when I first got on to Facebook, it was right after it became the non-college thing. You know what I mean? When it first opened up. And it was, oh man, the stuff you'd see on there, you're like, this isn't very well regulated. Like, there's a bunch of crap on here. And then it's funny because you started getting into, like, you started getting things like Reddit that were a little more, I don't know, like
really
organized and
a little bit more organized, but even more loose.
right. And it's funny. Then I think about that now. I have students that are 20 years old, 19, 18 years old. They've grown up with this being their source of information because you don't go to a library anymore. You know what I mean? And it's whatever you see. Hey, this is on there. It must be real. Some of the things I have heard younger kids say recently that they learned from the internet, it's mind-boggling. And I remember my one friend talking about QAnon. And
the only thing good about Facebook is to know who's a piece of shit or not.
Oh, and I think about we had this discussion the one day, and I said, okay, let's logically break this down. And I said, I want you to, understand that if I'm telling you something, like, I would not lie to you about this, okay? And I'm said, coming from, someone who's worked in investigation and things like that, I said, and I broke it down and said, there's no way this is humanly possible that this is going on the way that this is being projected. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
And it's just funny because they're like, wow, I guess I never thought about it like that, because you're getting that information fed from the box.
It's crazy.
And the box has been around forever, so it's legitimate. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? It would be like if you only relied on what you read in one newspaper or
I know.
one TV
It's
station.
insane.
And I think about that from my work in forensics. I always dealt with a scene investigator, okay? And 9 times out of 10, they were going to be the one writing the press conference or the press release. And then you go home and watch the news and see who got it right, who didn't. And sometimes no one got it right. Sometimes everybody got it right. Yeah, it's always a roll of the dice because you're relying on one person to disseminate a piece of information out.
Yeah, it's crazy.
to
And
many
I mean,
others.
but you could research, if you research a topic, you could find answers that are 2 completely different answers.
Oh, exactly.
You know what I mean? Are you the person that goes the extra step to fact check things?
Right.
Or are you just the person that says, that's crazy, and hit share?
Right.
And that's the world that we're in right now. That's a little bit, it's a blessing and a curse where we are.
And I think about that. It's weird too, because seeing people question science in the age of this plague has been odd. Okay. And it's like, has anyone been questioning like the laws of gravity?
I don't know.
Or the laws of thermodynamics? You know what I mean? Like, there's this questioning of science with vaccines, and I'm like, wow, like, are we going to question everything else?
I mean, it's just so crazy because it's like, I don't know. It's such like people are just so flippant to just, believe in some things that some might consider ridiculous. People believe that, the guy in the sky is going to take care of them, but they're swearing away, scientific things, you know what I mean? And those are like some of the conversations that you read on there that you're just like, there's a break in between
But
there.
once again, I think about this, science ruins everything. And if you know stuff, if you're educated in a certain sense, it's ruined for you. You know what I mean? You can't have that cynicism or skepticism available to it. Whereas I think about how many people aren't scientifically educated. And I can understand why you would believe one thing or another, especially
100%.
if maybe, say, this person that's leading your church is telling you one thing. They have much stronger influence over you than some scientists in Washington, D.C.
Yeah. Or you read one thing that might sound, all shiny and romantic, and then, it immediately gets programmed into the way that you believe, and your beliefs are that now.
And I think about it too. When I've had frank discussions with people, a lot of people have asked me what I think about what's going on with, COVID and all this stuff. I look back on when it first hit. I was teaching a pathology class online.
Yeah.
And of course my students were like, Mr. Drobish, like, you've been around this stuff before. You saw, the swine flu when it came through and all that. What do you think is going to happen with this? And I loved going back and looking back at this again a year and a half later. And I said, well, if it's handled correctly, if it's the way that things were done when the SARS outbreak hit, or, the swine flu 10 years ago, it gets contained, it gets handled and isolated and quarantined. And I said, quite honestly, if it's handled correctly from that capacity, we should be okay. It really shouldn't get here. It's all the way across the world. I said that would make it a pandemic. It's just an epidemic right now. And boy, was I wrong. Because of course it wasn't handled correctly in the country of origin, and it never was. So of course you're going to have this spread once it gets on an airline. You know what I mean? And I equated it to it's almost like 12 Monkeys.
Oh yeah.
In that sense, where that guy getting on that plane, you know what I mean? He didn't do it intentionally, but whoever that carrier was that brought it, and I did not think that was going to happen. And so I think I look back on that little prediction there. I was like, boy, good thing I don't work in virology, right?
Yeah, I know. It's crazy to think about that, because it's like one of the things that I was thinking about, preparing for you to come over today was like, in the beginning, whenever things were very, very unsure, were the standards of, autopsy and embalming, did those regulations become more tight? Were you guys forced to, because I'm sure that you're not wearing a hazmat suit every time you embalm a body, but, whenever COVID was still like something that we didn't know if people were going to turn into zombies and shit, like, were you obligated to wear this certain level of protection and everything?
All right. That's a good question. That's something a lot of people haven't thought about or talked about. What we didn't change 1%. Literally, my equipment that I wear is the same stuff I wear every single day. Nothing changed, because COVID isn't that scary, okay? I'm more worried about tuberculosis, you know what I mean? Like meningitis, hepatitis, Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease, flesh-eating virus, like those kind of things are way scarier. Hand sanitizer kills COVID. You know what I mean? Like that is saying something very strong.
Yeah.
So for us, what I see on a daily basis, COVID for me is like the cold or the flu. Not concerned. There's only been one post-mortem transmission that's been confirmed. Okay.
Oh, really?
One that we know of.
Yeah, I didn't know that at all.
Okay. And I don't know how reliable that information really was, but we weren't afraid of it. Like, you know what I mean? Like I was more afraid of living people with it than the dead. Okay. So that was the wild thing, was we didn't change anything about what we did other than wearing a mask in school. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And all of a sudden the rest of the universe realized what personal protective equipment was.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, that's what we had a shortage on, was what we used every single day to keep us safe from way scarier things. We're being eaten up by paranoids, like people hoarding and price gouging and things like that. Because, trying to get gloves, masks.
I didn't even think about that.
The surgical gowns, like
Did you guys run out of like embalming fluid and things like that?
We never ran out, but the shortages that started happening were frightening. Caskets were in short supply.
Oh my goodness.
Now it's funny. Now we're starting to see shipping issues. It's not a shortage of the chemicals themselves, but we just got a shipment in the other day. It was supposed to have been there a week prior, and they're never late. So we're now starting to think we're ordering ahead of time now.
I just saw an article talking about how everything is going to be delayed as far as like UPS, USPS.
Christmas is going to be very interesting. Toy shortages, shipping shortages, and some of that is a hype thing to sell more.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
But I could not believe there was a shortage of caskets, but there was, because production, shipping, and then of course, every time there was a surge, you'd have a surge of funerals. So yeah, it was wild to see what we could and what could not get. At a certain point, we didn't run out of things, but we had to get what we could. We were getting low quality gloves. You know what I mean? It's
had to make it work.
It's all there was. We were getting hand sanitizer where we could. So that was an interesting thing to see happen in our industry. Autopsies, I'm so glad I wasn't working in the autopsy lab anymore, because that would be scary to be around that and be having to cut it all open, you know what I mean, and dig through it, which I used to love doing. But I would not want to be having that kind of, because you would have to be in the full Tyvek and hazmat suits and things like that, at a certain biohazard level. So I relied on getting information from the institutes that were doing those and then correlating with what we saw in the laboratory.
Yeah.
So because, as I mentioned with the textbook that was coming out, I actually ended up writing a short, just little, write-up about our experiences with embalming COVID and things like that. So I had to have some kind of pathology to back that up as empirical data. But yeah, it was interesting to see how the rest of the world all of a sudden realized what PPE was and how important it is. But it was a strange experience to see how we didn't have to change what we do. And it made me feel safe. It made me feel safe in like my job that, wow, like we protect ourselves all the time.
Yeah.
And I think it made our students appreciate that a little more, that, right, we protect above and beyond, and so it was kind of funny. We showed them like, look, if you're afraid of COVID, you might want to reconsider this.
Yeah.
Because we had some people that were very afraid to be in school during this. And that's what we tried to share is, look, this is not that scary. There are other things that are much worse that'll come across. So yeah, it was wild. I never imagined that we would be difficult to get gloves, masks, gowns, face shields. Like those are just things that we order in bulk constantly. And it was interesting to see what happened was, I mentioned the kind of the shift in care in nursing homes and hospitals. When it first hit, we saw a lot of paranoia and a lot of uncertainty. People didn't know how it was being transmitted. Could the dead spread it? We were seeing people come in, dead people, with the masks on, like the N95 masks.
Really?
Those were the most viable things on the planet. And they were being put on the deceased. So,
wow.
Because people were worried about transmission from moving the body. So,
my goodness.
So just the misinformation and, uncertainty caused the shortage to be even more exacerbated. So, yeah, it was strange times for sure. I'm glad things have kind of normalized a little.
Oh my God. Jeez. What a wild last couple years it's been since you've been on.
It hasn't stopped. It's been the busiest time I've worked in the industry, and it's wild. It's also made people retire. That's another thing.
I bet
We've had older instructors retire, like right in the middle. Things like that. They were like, I don't want to teach on Zoom. I'm afraid of plague. All these. We've even seen funeral directors retiring. There's people that are like, I think I'm going to get out of this now. I've been in it long enough. So there's people that are now like looking to sell their businesses and things like that.
It really
prematurely.
Yeah, it really did. Like, it kind of just made everyone, take a real introspective look at their life, as far as like, what do they want out of life? What is
life could be very short at this point.
Yeah,
what should I do
it's
for the
crazy.
short term? And I think that's what people are doing. Is they're like, wow, I thought I was going to have a nice long road to retirement.
100%. But
and then
now
all of a sudden
things
this
are
kicks
changing.
in, and you couldn't even go on vacation during this. You know what I mean? So I think people are like, wow, well, I need to look at my time that I have left and make it as valuable as possible. So, which is a great opportunity for young funeral directors now to come out and be able to open a business at a young age during a time when it could be profitable.
Yeah.
And that's the wild thing. It's right. Like some doors are opening, some doors are closing, but there's definitely room for people to, make it, you were saying like, kind of like make a big change during this. And I think that's why we're seeing the increase in enrollment. People are like, wow, I can make a change for my, for my community and things like that. And it's a job that's going to be stable no matter what happens.
Yeah.
So I think that's why.
Job security for sure.
We're seeing that surge. Yeah.
What what are your plans for life? Do you have goals? Like,
oh man, I think about that. We were just talking about this the other day. I took a psychology class when I was in my undergrad at Point Park.
Yeah.
Adult human development. And it was all about growing up. Okay. I took that class when I was 35. So I was already pretty far along, but I still had life goals. And one of our final projects in that class was to write what you're going to do in the next 10 years. Like write about kind of your self-actualization. It was supposed to be going to the top of that pyramid. And I look back on that project and I fulfilled it already. Like it's weird. It's weird. Like start teaching at my alma mater, become a licensed funeral director. Like it's what I was looking at, and I've done those things,
checking off boxes.
And now it's kind of funny because literally this year, it's funny you asked about the future because I literally have my retirement set up now, which I never ever in my life envisioned would happen. Like I didn't think I was going to live to be 30, just the way I just kind of lived my life. And it's insane to think about having retirement set up now at 50. Like I have a 10 and a 15-year plan. So the money's set up, like the investments are set up for both of those, depending on, what happens. But yeah, it's wild to actually have a future plan set up to where I know that unless something drastic happens, I'll be stable. Okay. And the way we planned it was, my mother-in-law, my wife's mother, lives up in State College, and she has her plan set up end to end. She's in a, what's called a continuum care facility where no matter what happens, all the way to like, dementia care or anything like that, she's set up and in a great place. It's actually Quaker run. It's a really amazing place. And so we were like, wow, we need to do that because we don't have kids. And so there's no one to take care of us, which we wouldn't expect anybody to. But we wanted to make sure that, we don't end up in a shoddy nursing home or shoddy care facility.
Yeah.
Because of what I see every day. And that's the thing I always tell people. If you want to find out a good nursing facility or a bad one, ask a funeral director. We're the ones that see what comes out of those.
Wow.
We see the conditions. We go in there and remove the people from those. So I said, I know the places. I have a short list of places I don't want to end up.
Yeah.
So I said, let's, and it's awesome. My wife is more of a planner totally than I am. And it's good that we got this set up. But we met with a financial planner that's amazing.
When did you do this?
Less than 6 months ago.
We literally just did. We had our third meeting with him, and that's exactly where we are in life. And, my mother came up in a corporate environment. She was a vice president of a big part of PNC Bank, always had money planned, was very thrifty, but she, retired and then saw a financial planner before she retired to make sure everything was all right for her and my dad. Me and my brother were good to go. But she was like, you should really look into talking to him because I wish I would have did this whenever I was younger. And I'm like, damn, let's do it. So me and my wife sat down. We have a projected outlook of what our retirement will look like, what we need to do to be able to be a certain level of comfort that we're at, how we're going to be able to do this, what is necessary for us to be able to live a certain way whenever we don't have a job. And I feel like that it was invaluable because people just, I have so many friends that don't even think about
zero plans
at all. But I think about you, we don't have kids, I have a big family, but I don't expect people to, take care of us. Right. I want to be able to be self-sufficient with me and my wife and not have to, be a burden on someone. But that's what we did. We talked to a financial planner, and it really is just such a thing that, it scares you at first because you're like, damn, I'm not as prepared as where I wanted to be. And you need that to be able to understand where you're at, I feel.
Oh, yeah. And in doing it at your age is so beneficial because you can be more aggressive in how you invest.
Absolutely.
I have to be more conservative because we're on, such a shorter term limit. But that's once we got this established, I was like, wow, this feels so good because we've paid off almost all of our debt in the past couple of years. And to now be able to invest that, I have a 403B at work, but I've only had it for a year. It's not old at all. So my wife's investment is a little better on her retirement because she's been in her job for years. But once we got this set up, it was just so great to see.
It's a peace of mind.
It is. And like I said, we set a certain level of comfort where we can't go below this. It has to be at this level.
I want to be able to live, within the means of kind of what I'm doing now.
Right.
You know what I mean? I don't want to have to, change my life after hopefully living a fulfilling life and just have to drop down a tier.
Right.
So I made that pretty, known in the middle. It's just I want you to project everything to kind of be how we are now.
Right.
It's and it's smart to be able to do that because I don't want to, I want to be able to just do shit like this and not have to worry about it,
Right. And I think about this too. That was one of the eye-opening things for my wife and I during COVID was, when the lockdown happened, it's all of a sudden the entire world had to resort to where are you? What's going on in your home?
Yeah.
It's your home now. Okay. And my wife was able to transition her work to home very easily. She could telecommute as she needed to. But I thought about that. I saw it with our students. All of a sudden these kids are stuck at home and they're having to Zoom with us and all this. Well, not everybody is in a safe environment. Not everybody is in whether it's mental or excuse me, or physically safe environment. Not everybody has that.
Yeah.
And not everybody has privacy. Like if you live in an apartment with 3 kids and a dog. And
you don't have no peace and quiet to learn.
You're in the corner while this is going on behind you with distractions. So I think about that. Like it really hit home that, wow, like I have a safe home environment. What a great time to have a gym in my garage. I bought an electronic drum set in the past year and a half just in time. But what a great time to have a drum studio in my garage, a gym, you know what I mean? Because you're not going out and doing any of that stuff anywhere.
Yeah.
That I had, my garden that I could help maintain and keep going. Because I think that literally kept me sane.
Yeah.
But it was so weird to think about that. Like, wow, so many people do not have a stable, like just even home life and things like that. And I was like, I felt very fortunate. Not that, it landed on my lap, like we put it all together, but it really kind of hit home, and it made me think differently about when I taught people about, wow, maybe the reason they're not doing so well in this class is they're having a hard time with everything in their life right now.
Absolutely.
Like it became this thing where it was kind of eye-opening in a sense where it's like, wow, I am really fortunate in what I have. But it also made me think, wow, I got to be a little more, understanding of other people aren't in that situation. But yeah, it was strange. I think about that. I imagine if I would have been in the apartments I used to live in back then, I'd probably been going stir crazy, and being like a tiny little 2-room place with my wife and cats and all this stuff. And because I think about that, the places we used to live, we had loud neighbors and you'd smell drugs coming out of apartments and all that. I'm like, that would be so unpleasant to be stuck in for a year or however long and be isolated with that.
You're a product of your environment. If it was chaotic, you would become chaotic.
Yeah, exactly. So I think about that. Like wow. And I think about how even, like I said, I went through a depressive state and wasn't feeling too great. So I'm like, man, it could have been so much worse.
Yeah.
But the whole thing was very eye-opening. And I think it's one of the reasons that we did that planning was, wow, look how unstable the universe just got.
100% at the drop of a hat.
Yeah.
And people, this is something that nobody has really seen before, the way that this worked. So this is kind of an eye-opening thing for everyone, whether you're, 60 plus, whether you're, someone my age, whether you're someone in high school. It's like, this shit never happened before. So it's like, you're just like, damn, it really, like, we really don't have a handle like we, play that we do.
I say everything kind of flipped and it's now kind of landing how it's landing.
Exactly.
And it's bizarre to think about, the shortages, the service industry. Like,
that's what I'm saying.
Go to a restaurant, you know what I mean? Try to get, it's wild. There's even shortages. Like we went to a restaurant recently, we couldn't get wine.
Yeah, that's
because the distributor had an issue. It's like, that is bizarre.
It is. It's weird because that's never been something that we've had to face.
Here you go. This was something that was unbelievably eye-opening for me because I think about this. I mentioned once again Lincoln Avenue Brewing, great place right in my neighborhood. I could go get draft beer in a growler, you know what I mean, during this whole thing, which was awesome. When they had to shut down the restaurant, they were doing delivery and takeout. It was awesome. I would order food from them and get a growler of beer and it would be delivered by the brewer. You know what I mean? So I'm like, I was really fortunate to have that right in my neighborhood. Okay?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because I probably wouldn't have been very happy without that. But I think about a guy I'm casual, acquaintance with runs one of the bottle shops at Giant Eagle. Okay. And it's the one over on Center Avenue over in Shadyside.
Yeah.
I know a couple of years ago, I think statistically number wise, it was the largest volume bottle shop in Pennsylvania. That's how much beer they sold out of that place, okay? And this was about 6 months ago, maybe. I stopped in one day and was getting some beer and chat with him because I hadn't seen him for a while. And turns out he could not get Corona beer.
I saw that. Okay. Corona was a shortage.
And it had nothing to do with people thought it was the disease beer.
Yeah.
It was the intersection of just COVID going on with, everything with shipping and all that. The wildfires in California, okay, first of all, was burning everything.
Yeah.
All the extra water was being used to fight the fires. So municipal water supplies were diminished, and that's where they get the water to make Corona. The production facility couldn't even get water, and there was a bottle shortage because people weren't recycling bottles. You could not get Corona
perfect storm
on the East Coast. He said the only thing they had for 2 months was the Corona Extra or something like that. Can you imagine going to a beer store?
Yeah, not being able to get something.
Able to buy Corona beer. Like that's a staple of American culture. So it was wild to even just see like right within the brewing industry, something like
the changes that were like
that we might not recover from, you know what I mean? But it's frightening to see that like, right, when something else interacts with the plague, like those wildfires and the water shortages of like how something,
what affects and what's, people don't think about it.
Something that should be right there in front of you every day that's commonplace is gone. So it's so wild to think what is next, like what's going to come, what's Christmas going to be like? You know what I mean? Like
who knows? Who knows? It's going to be strange though. I saw something the other day that someone was like, are we finally able to kill the tradition of blowing out birthday candles? And it was literally like a divided 50-50, like, you're insane if you think that I'm going to be blowing out birthday candles now. And then there's other people that are like, you're insane if you think that I'm not going to blow out birthday candles now. And it's just such like a wild conversation even, you know what I mean?
It's something that when you study virology and pathology, and it's one of the most disgusting things you can imagine.
I know.
Is eating a cake that someone just blew their breath across.
I know.
More than once maybe. But it's funny.
Little kids with their saliva, it's even more wet.
Exactly. And so there's certain societal norms that are going to change because of this. I think about, I didn't shake somebody's hand for a year.
Yeah, it's very weird.
I think I've shaken about 5 hands. It's more fist bumps and elbows now.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Which is interesting. I'm like, wow, that's so wild. And it's going to be a change, I think, that we will see, because I'm so used to being a business person, shaking people's hands.
Same with me. I feel bad whenever I can't.
It's odd. And I remember the first person, I was like, oh my God, I'm so sorry I did that. And he was like, oh, I didn't even think about it. But I was like, wow, it's kind of cool we got to do that. You know what I mean? Then I'm like sanitizing. And
I know. I think I shook your hand upstairs.
We did.
It's just like, it's so weird to even think that that's a thing that you have to even question nowadays.
Be cautious about, right? And so I think about that, like, you will never see somebody not cover a sneeze again.
Yeah.
Like, there's a great thing. There's a good positive thing.
Yeah,
but think about how many
sure.
people you would just see sneeze or, you know what I mean, expel, whatever,
Sick.
Openly. But, right, there's certain societal norms now that if you don't go with it, you're going to be kind of like a pariah. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
And it's wild because I think, it's still happening. It's still going on. And we keep seeing the mask mandate up and down. And in education, we pay attention to this every day.
Yeah, you have to.
And it's wild to see how some schools are doing it right, some aren't. And so, right, we determine what we're going to do we go by what the Allegheny County Health Department tells us. But it's wild to see some schools like mismanaging it. Like Penn State is the greatest example. Huge school. And they have screwed up like so much in how they handle their protocols.
Yeah.
And you see like the professors are fighting against it. The students are against it. Like, the board of
wild.
trustees. So that's something that we do every day. We actually read a journal of higher education blog and kind of like newsletter.
And keep up to date with
every single day our administrative staff goes through to see what's going on in other schools. And almost every day we'll see a topic we've discussed happening at another school. And we see how they handle it to determine, right, what's the best way to approach this? But it's day to day. It's like a question mark. Every
That's
day
life
like,
now.
Like every day you're like, what's going to happen today? How will I adjust to it? And right, so I'm like, there's your new norm. If you want to use that term, it's question mark. It's just be ready, be flexible.
That's exactly it. It's question mark.
And the people that have adapted well and survived in their businesses are going to thrive.
Yeah.
Think about that. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, you made it through. Like this steel is going to sharpen steel. It's like if you were able to get through this has to be the biggest, sign of accomplishment. That it's the biggest test that you've ever been through.
It is,
and this really shows, if you had your shit together.
Well, and I think about that. If you're coming out and excelling now, like I said, the school, we're doing great. We're at a record enrollment. So if we can keep improving the way we're doing, it's a good thing. Lincoln Avenue Brewing, they've been open 2 years. They opened right when this happened. Last weekend, they had an Oktoberfest celebration where they brought in live music. It was their third time they did it. They shut down the street. They brought in, which I'm a music guy, so getting to see music again was
amazing.
Fantastic.
I'm going to my first concert on Monday.
I went to Dead and Company and up in Hershey not too long ago. And
was it weird?
No, it was awesome because the members of that band are in their 70s. Okay?
Yeah.
they're like so secure. Like to get in the front pit, you had to have vaccination proof. If you didn't, you weren't even allowed in the front section at all.
Yeah.
They're doing all outdoor tours, and they were really good about it.
That's good. That's what this is. We're at
Where are you
stage A.
going? Okay.
Yeah, stage A. It's going to be outside, and I believe that you have to show vaccination or 24-hour negative result, which is great. You know, I'll probably still wear a mask up there, just because I don't know. Who knows? I feel like that. I don't know. It's such like a weird thing. Like I went to Giant Eagle the other day, and I have a rental car right now, and I didn't have a mask in there, and it's like I felt I was like the only one in there without one, and you know I feel like an asshole if I don't. But I didn't have anyone in my car. I didn't have it in my car.
And I think about that. You're used to carrying it now, like in your glove box, somewhere on you. And things
Yeah,
like
I got
that.
a whole bag of masks right in there just for that certain period of time.
And that's the thing is, it's funny now that there's not a requirement. I play it by ear almost.
I know.
I think about where I'm going.
What's the majority doing?
Right. Am I in my bubble or not? And I think about that. I went to a convention, the first convention I went to since this all happened, and it was up in Erie. And Erie County is not masking. They're not doing a lot of, and I didn't feel really like odd because I'm vaccinated. I've been around it enough.
Yeah.
And I was around funeral service. It was all funeral directors, people, you know, and things like that. But it was interesting to see how Erie County was not adhering to anything like Allegheny is.
Yeah, we have camp up there.
And I just saw this last week that they have a massive infection rate and things like that. So I'm like, it's not a surprise.
Not a surprise at all.
And usually when you have unmasking, you have less vaccination rate, things like that. So like I said, you kind of look at it pocket by pocket where you're going. Who do you trust? It's safe to put a mask on. It's not an inconvenience, you know. But that's the thing is that, right, if you are out of your comfort zone, you're driving a rental car, you don't have your stuff with you.
You know what I mean? That's what I was like, geez.
And I bet you they didn't have one sitting there inside for you to
Nope,
wear.
they didn't. And that's what it was. And that's why, you know, I was waiting for someone to say something because I would have been like, hey, there's no mask here. So, but what could you do? I mean, it's a hell of a conversation. 3 hours we're at right now.
Oh my Lord.
Yeah, I know. So I feel like I have to push us to the last segment, else we can just keep talking forever. Okay, so Desert Island questions.
All right.
Desert Island questions whenever I give each guest 3 categories to take with them on a desert island and exhaust until expulsion. First category, 3 movies to watch.
3 movies. Oh, wow. Let's see. Wow. Movies. I'm terrible about movies because I go through phases.
What about you got TV? You like TV?
You know what? Let's see. Movie-wise, let's see. Okay, here you go. How about Aliens? Aliens was one of those movies.
That's a good one.
Where that creature, like that xenomorph thing, they showed it in the first one, you know what I mean? But in that movie, that thing was so gnarly. And I think about just like how like terrifying that movie is. Just, you know what I mean? Like the thought of being stuck there with those things.
Think about how that looked, like how it was whenever they did it. Like it's an old movie.
Oh man!
And like
back then, that
incredible.
H.R. Giger, yeah, I love his artwork. So I think that's another thing. Like that character, like that xenomorph thing, just like resonates as like imagine if that's what is out there.
Hell yeah!
You know what I mean?
Terrifying.
That's a good one. Let's see. And I think about going back to kind of like classics that that you watch all the time. One that's hilarious and it's like a seasonal thing, but I swear, like I watch it every single time it's on is Christmas Story.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean? Like that movie is just so ridiculously funny. And I'm not a big Christmas person, but it's like that thing is just hilarious.
I'm one of the ones that loathe it.
Okay.
I exhausted it so much just over the years having it being played that I'm just like, this ain't even that good of a movie. It's like if you watch it so many times, usually if you just watch it one time per year, you don't see anything wrong with it. You're just like, oh, this is a traditional movie. But it's like you watch it so many times, you're like, this ain't even that good.
It's background, I think. That's what we do.
That's what it is. It's background.
And we background it. I think that's exactly why I like it. I don't sit down and watch it. You know what I mean?
Background.
I think that's what it is. Yeah, probably. Let's see. And oh man. let's see. Okay, here you go. And this is one of my favorite, like another scary kind of movie thing is 28 Days Later.
Love it.
Okay.
Fantastic zombie movie.
And I think about that is when people ask about, could this epidemic turn into something like that? I'm like,
if it does, that's what it is.
One of the reasons I like that movie so much is it's realistic in the sense that could be like a weaponized version of rabies. Like, because I told you, science ruins everything. So when I look at horror movies and all science fiction, like I can totally destroy it and be like, this is why it can't happen. It's terrible. Yeah. And it's not fun. But I think about that, like 28 Days Later, that was one where like that is totally plausible.
Yeah, for sure.
And it could happen, something like that. So, but I think about that, like, yeah, those kind of movies, like, it's like they're so edgy. And like I said, I don't get really scared, but that movie is like frightening. And
it really is.
Film it. And, I'll go up there with another one too, as far as like being a scary good one I'd like to watch over and over again is Seven.
Oh,
that's just psychologically terrifying as well.
Box.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, and it's funny because my coworkers and I have discussed that before. When I originally saw that movie, I didn't think it was going to be the wife's head in the box. I thought it was going to be the baby.
Oh, wow.
Because I was going to horrifying, terrible.
Very dark.
But I'm thinking like, wow, they watered that down. They could have made that much scarier.
That's true. Okay. Second category. I usually ask people to take books. I'm curious. 3 of your favorite Halloween candies.
Ooh. Oh, man.
As I eat a Kit Kat.
I was going to say, well, I think about this, and it's funny, like, when I was a kid, it was always the classics. You know what I mean? They have so many, like, millions of candy bars now, but I think it has to be one of my all-time favorite is Take 5. That is like,
I don't know if I've ever eaten it.
It is like the pretzel with the peanut butter. It's all the good stuff in a candy bar jammed together into one thing.
I have to get one.
And they've making some variations of it, but like quite honestly, it's if I could make a candy bar, that's what I would make. Like literally, it's one of those ones. Definitely second is Reese's peanut butter cups. Like that's just
amen.
That's a food group.
You a frozen guy? You like them frozen?
I'll eat them frozen, melted. We just had a batch recently that got kind of melted and reformed, and they were all like wonky looking. But yeah, I'll eat them in any form. Okay. And it's funny. I think about like the seasonal versions of them, like the eggs and the trees and all that stuff. Yeah,
not a fan. I like the cups.
Gotcha. Okay.
The ratio of chocolate to peanut butter is different.
There you go, and it is different for each of the different forms and all that.
100%.
And then wow, quite honestly, man, I think about this like all the classics and all that stuff. You always got plain old Hershey's chocolate bar, man. Like, like that is so. And especially, I was just out at Hershey not too long ago. Yeah, and I think about when you get chocolate at Hershey, it is fresh. Yeah. It tastes
stuff that we have has been in a box for a while.
Man, I think about the Halloween candy that's out now. That was made 3 months ago. It was really cool actually being right at Hershey.
Never been there. I got to go.
And getting chocolate right from there. Because funny thing, we were meeting people there for that Dead and Company show. And there was this deadhead walking around that my brother-in-law knew. And she was handing out her Mounds bars to people. She's like, hey, you're having Mounds bar. And we're like, okay, cool.
Is there anything in this?
Well, that was our first question, right? Is this normal or extra special? But it was a tradition that her husband, he had died a couple of years ago. He would go to Dead shows and hand out Almond Joy bars to people, like or whatever, in Mounds. That's awesome. So they were at Hershey. They went in and bought some, and were dispersing them out to the crowd. So that was kind of fun.
That's cool. Third one, 3 CDs.
Okay, music. This is a tough one because I'm a music kid. Okay, I got to go back to my initial. 2 of my ones from the original episode, the entire catalog of the Grateful Dead. Like, I just got to have that because I'm still just totally immersed in that stuff. Number 2, I think I mentioned was Miles Davis' Kind of Blue, which I brought a copy for you.
This is for me?
Yes. Oh, absolutely.
Thank you so much.
That is the album that changed my life as a musician. I was never into jazz or anything like that. When I listened to that album, it was the right place, right time, and it changed me as a musician.
I will absolutely listen to this.
This is like the quintessential starter jazz album for like most people. And then you branch out on your own direction from there. And all you got to do is follow anybody else in that lineup, and you can find different forms of jazz and, different eras of jazz from that.
You're talking about like find any of these people?
Miles Davis, Cannonball Adderley. Yeah, all the guys on that album were like, kind of the big heavy hitters.
Alto
in that era.
sax, tenor sax.
Yep. So you look at that, and that's some of the legends of jazz. But that's the album that got me hooked on it. So let me know if you like it.
I was just watching saxophone. Some dude I guess he was like had to be the example of a young kid who had to be, forced into it or something like that, who just like, came out killing it. It's like all these like new age songs and like these new ways of doing it. And it's just him just ripping on a sax. It's amazing.
Nice.
I love a saxophone.
Awesome. But yeah, that's like, John Coltrane and Cannonball Adderley are like two of my favorite saxophone players. So, but yeah, that's the album. Like you've probably even heard a song.
I'm sure I have
before.
Because I think I saw this cover art. I've listened to something from that cover art.
Yeah, this is before. A remaster of that. So right, that's the original cover work. But the quality of this is really good.
I think the one that I know is Blue and Green.
There you go.
I'm pretty sure.
But it's funny. I played songs off that album in jazz bands and things like that for years. So.
I appreciate this.
Absolutely. And then let's see. My other one, number 3 would be Allman Brothers live at the Fillmore, 1971.
I have listened to that too.
Oh man, I'm a big Allman Brothers band fan, and I just been like immersing myself back into that album again. And it's so funny. Thinking about like when I first started listening to them, my wife got me into them like 23 years ago. And it's so funny how like they became so influential on me.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons is that album actually. Okay. This. So basically, Dwayne Allman, who was the older brother in the Allman Brothers band, died real young. And he got into jazz and blues and things like that and kind of immersed himself into it.
Yeah.
And he listened to that kind of blue album for like a year straight, like all the time. And that's kind of how he learned how to do improvisational jazz and stuff like that in blues. So when I first got into the Allman Brothers, I was like, oh, cool. Well, okay, I'll do the same thing he did. I actually listened to that album every night while I went to sleep.
I think I remember you telling that
the first time.
Yeah.
And it just kind of literally got into me. You know what I mean? But that's really funny because you'll hear kind of blue and those things in the Allman Brothers music. Like once you start listening to it, you'll pick up on like kind of like you'll hear green and blue. You'll hear certain things from those albums in their music. And it's just so awesome that like you can get something from kind of blue into the Allman Brothers. You know what I mean? Like that kind of transition. So
I'm excited to listen to it. Okay. Third to last question is the death row meal.
Wow. Okay, well, let's see. Seeing as how I was vegetarian for so long, I'm making up for lost time eating meat.
Yes.
So I would want one of every animal. Like essentially like one of those things where it's like, pulled pork from the pig and steak.
I'll give you that. That's a good answer.
Like one of every available, popular meat, I think. Because, I think about that. Like I'm making up for lost time, catching up on all that vegetarianism. So.
What about a dessert?
Wow. Here you go. Okay. If it's, I don't even, if they're still around. There was a restaurant in State College, little Asian place, and Susie Wong's was the name of the place, and they made a sponge cake.
Oh.
It was a rum cake.
To die for.
Unbelievable. Like it was, I've never had anything quite like it before. And I think about that. Like I
think about that cake often.
I would drive there now for it. Like cut off a finger, but yeah, Susie Wong sponge cake for sure.
All right. Second to last question, probably the most telling question, is if you're getting ready for a road trip and you could go into a gas station and pick one snack, what would it be?
I have go-to travel foods, and I mentioned that I traveled for work and things like that for a while. Like I was doing road trips out, and I would say one of the number one things that I eat when I travel, whether it's going to State College for 2 hours or 9 hours to like Tennessee, is combos.
Combos is one of the most common answers whenever I ask that. What flavor?
And it depends on where I'm driving, because I have found this out. Like there are certain flavors you can only buy at certain chains. Okay. For a long time, I loved the 7-layer tortilla. Okay?
Yeah.
And you could only get those at Sheetz for some reason. I swear to God, you cannot get them anywhere else. They don't have them there now, but you can get them at certain Sunoco stations on the turnpike. Like, it's so weird. Certain flavors are
where all the snacks are.
Well, it's weird. I traveled so much
over
so you got to years.
So you understand it.
And I did. I had certain places I'd stop at. Now, funny, if you ever get a chance, the Breezewood interchange off the turnpike. Okay?
Yeah.
It's a bizarre thing.
Oh, yeah.
And it's not what it used to be. It used to be very populated. You know what I mean? Now it's got all these rundown places. But there was a survey recently that there's a gas station there. I can't remember which one. It's easy to find the article. They were finding out the gas station that had the best potato chip selection. Okay,
Was that one?
there's one there. There is one gas station there at the Breezewood interchange that has every single popular Pennsylvania potato chip, like Utz,
Snyder's, all
Snyder's,
that.
Hanover's, Middleswarth, you name it, they have them. They have them all there. Like it was like this article recently that was the best
Wow.
place to get snack foods.
Maybe I'll travel out there and go interview them.
Breezewood Interchange. There you go, man. Like I'm serious. It was wild. I was like laughing hysterically because I have students from all over the country from our online program. And
Yeah.
when they find out, like, you know, we have conversation about stuff, they'll bring me chips from places that I've been that I can't get.
That's the best.
Like hard to find things. So yeah, I had a student recently from the middle of the state that brought me Middleswarth chips, which you can get some here, but not all of them.
Yeah.
And she knew the ones I liked. So yeah, it's kind of
There you
fun.
go.
Yeah,
There you go. That's the best.
I look for those things.
All right, last question that I ask everyone. If you could have a conversation with anyone alive or dead, who would it be and why?
Ooh.
Can't pick a loved one.
Gotcha. Okay. Let's see. Okay. And I know we talked a little bit about Carl Jung, I think, in our last conversation. We were talking about synchronicity.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if I mentioned him in that one, but that would be one where I think Carl Jung would be an exceedingly interesting conversation. Just because of like the concepts that he came up with. Like, how do you envision those things?
Yeah.
How do you envision the concept of synchronicity across like humanity? You know what I mean? Like that to me is like such an astounding thing to come up with. Like I don't understand that kind of broad scope thinking. Either that or Carl Sagan. I think Carl Sagan actually would probably be more of a favorite because he was so far ahead of his time and he was such an intellectual thinker. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
And it's so funny the things that, you know, kind of revealed about him later and all this stuff, like that he was this pothead and all this stuff. Like, it's so funny. Like he was just such a brilliant thinker, but was able to like condense it down to where almost anybody could understand it.
Yeah.
And he was like,
Consumable.
you look at some of his quotes and they're just still, they carry so much wisdom and so much like knowledge that people can't, you know, even conceive. So yeah, I think I'd go with Carl Sagan on that one, actually.
That's a great answer.
Because I think about that movie Contact.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
there's where, okay, I like I said, you know, there's certain things I've had ruined for me for science, but that movie makes me hopeful and optimistic that there is something better and something else out there that's more. You know what I mean?
Hell yeah.
Because if we're like, you
It's
know what
a
I mean?
shame.
Yeah, like, and that's what the quote is in that movie. It would sure be a waste of space if there wasn't something else. You know what I mean?
Wow.
Like it would, yeah, sure be a waste of space. There should be a shame if there wasn't something else better. So, yeah, we'll go with Carl Sagan.
What a conversation. I can't thank you enough for coming over and talking to me about all this.
Thanks for having me.
This was
a blast.
Before, as I said, one of my favorite episodes was the last one. I mean, you're right up there again. Like, this was a fantastic episode. 3 hours and 15 minutes.
Whew, that's a long time for me to yap.
I mean, it's a long time for me too, as well. But you know, I thought every bit of it was, you know, engaging. I thought it was an entertaining conversation. I loved every bit of it. We had some
fun.
pepper talk. Mm-hmm. We had some creepy ass talk. We had some introspective talk. You know, like that's everything you could want in a podcast.
Life and growing up, right? Getting old.
That's what I mean. Like, that's everything you could want in a podcast. Talk about ghosts. Like, come on now. But I appreciate you taking the time and coming over and talking to me about all you do. Please take a second and promote anything that you would like to promote.
Like I said, you know, things are exciting at the Pittsburgh Institute of Mortuary Science. If you are interested in, you know, finding out more, contact us. We are very active on social media. You can check out all the exciting things we do there all the time. We're even on TikTok sometimes, as much as we can do that. But yeah, and if you have any, you know, questions about that, contact us there at the school. I just want to thank all my friends, family, especially my wife, Shannon, my cats. Like I said, my friends at Lincoln Avenue Brewing, my second family, and all the students, all my coworkers, and you know, like I said, just, you know, everyone that's made, you know, the last year and a half tolerable and worth living. So, and thanks to you, you know, your podcast is amazing and it's getting bigger all the time. And I'm glad to be part of it.
Absolutely. Happy birthday again. Everyone else that's listening, thank you as usual. We had a little bit of a hiatus the last couple weeks, navigating life problems, but we're back with another great episode, and next week we will be back with another one. But as always, thank you for the support. T-shirts and crew necks will be delivered. They should be delivered by the time this comes out. But anyway, see you again next week. Call you right back.